I'm drawing infinite cards in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 551 Caesar arrives. When Ian and Eric came to the underground prison kitchen of the 5-star building, which is the exit leading to the back door, they found that it had been invaded and occupied by a group of people. Many chefs and guards fainted to the ground, and the fire alarm system was triggered, and the sprinklers made it look like it was raining heavily inside. This group, of course, is Hank and Garfield led by Charles. I didn't expect that you would come to save me. Of course, you are also the most annoying person I see today, bar none. Eric saw Charles, his eyes moved down to his feet, and he was surprised. Your legs, are you alright? Listen, Eric, Charles' body was already drenched, and he looked at him coldly. If I didn't have to, I would never come to rescue you. I will rescue you this time, and you must obey my orders. I don't have a helmet now, so I have to follow your orders. Eric pointed to his head, losing the shielding telepathic helmet Shrung made. He could only be obedient in front of Charles. I won't get into your dirty brain anymore, and I can't get in. Charles turned his face away. Before Eric could understand what he meant by not getting in, a protective door in a kitchen opened. Nearly 10 prison guards armed with special pistols broke in. Don't move. The muzzle of the pistol was aimed at Charles and the others, including the Garfield standing on the table with its sharp claws. Charles, stop them, Eric whispered. Charles kept shaking his head. I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. Eric seemed to realize something. Fortunately, there is no shortage of metal tools in the underground prison kitchen. When he was about to use the magnetic field control, he felt a blur in front of his eyes, and all the guards who came in were lying on the ground. Ian didn't know when he stood opposite him, clapping his hands, as if he had already done it. A ball of flames suddenly appeared in the corner of the kitchen. Isazo walked out of it, first smiled at Eric, long time no see, then he said to Charles, there is already a plane waiting at the private airport in New York. There you go, you can leave New York and go to Paris. Eric's pupils shrank slightly, and he couldn't help asking, what happened? Didn't even the teacher get involved? Isazo explained, this time, the young master and I are still on the sidelines. The matter still needs to be resolved by you. It's really like his style. Eric suddenly showed a thoughtful look 10 minutes later. The 5-star building in the United States issued a most wanted warrant. At the same time, a private jet took off from an airport in New York and headed straight for Paris. In the VIP cabin of the private jet, Charles hugged the awkward Garfield and told Eric face-to-face that the catastrophe crisis that would occur in the future all stemmed from Raven's current actions alone. Eric took a sip of his wine and said, that is to say, we just need to be one step ahead, rush to the government meeting in Paris, stop Raven before she shoots the scientist who invented the Sentinel, and we can change the future, right? Yes. We still need to protect her, and don't let her fall into the hands of research institutions. Charles put down his glass, leaned forward, and looked directly at Eric who was sitting nearby. It's all because of you. It was you who misled her into a dark path. The Raven I knew would never kill. What do you know? Eric stood up, put his hands on the table, and said in a cold voice that could not hide his anger, I am fighting for the cause of mutants, for our cause. Charles, the one who really abandoned us is you. Most of Eric's magnetic field ability comes from anger, so under the anger, the magnetic field is infinitely strengthened and magnified, directly interfering with a private jet flying at an altitude of nearly, meters as if there was an invisible big hand holding the private jet tightly. The large area casing sank downward at a speed visible to the naked eye. The face of Hank who was driving the plane changed slightly, and the plane tended to lose control under the interference of the magnetic field. Facing the angry Eric, Charles, who has lost all his abilities at this time, and Logan who is possessed by Garfield, there is nothing they can do about it, and because Ian went home after rescuing people, Isazo was the only person in the cabin who was convenient to take action. If you don't make a move, something will happen. Just when Isazo was hesitating, there was a sudden knock on the door of the private jet that was on the verge of losing control. Will someone knock on the door of a plane flying high in the sky? Isazo froze for a moment, and then showed a knowing smile. The angry Eric seemed to sense something. His expression changed immediately. He released the overflowing strong magnetic field, and muttered to himself, he's here. The cabin door of the private jet was opened, and before the airflow poured in, a figure entered it and closed the door smoothly. Everyone looked along, and it was not Caesar, but Caesar was holding a blonde lolly in his arms. She is Garfield. No, Logan's beast eyes narrowed, and he was the first to recognize Kin's identity. That is also the only mutant who can theoretically defeat the Sentinel. What are you arguing? Caesar looked at Eric and Charles peacefully with a smile on his face. No, it's just a disagreement. Eric sat back on the chair. There was probably no other person in the world except Caesar who could make him restrain himself so much. Caesar nodded and said, then you have to think clearly on the plane. After arriving in Paris, your every move will completely rewrite the future history of this time and space. Kin opened her cute eyes wide, looked at the people she didn't know, and hugged Caesar tightly, unwilling to let go. Paris, outside the government council building. The square was full of gathered media and people. They enthusiastically surrounded the cordon and watched as senior congressmen and military officials came to the conference building under the escort of military forces, preparing to participate in the annual meeting state conference. What is less known is that at this major meeting, a decision will be made on whether to pass a proposal called Project Sentinel. Conference building, inside the closed conference hall. Several congressmen and chief executives gathered around a table, and a short, bespectacled scientist was standing and explaining the proposal to them. Sentinel has powerful combat power and far exceeds Boeing's flight speed. It is an epoch-making milestone product. Most importantly, it can detect and lock mutant genes, and only eliminate mutants hidden among ordinary people. While explaining, Trask did not forget to take out the small detection instrument in his pocket. Even if I activate it now, it will not respond in any way. Just before the words were finished, the small detection instrument beeped like a slap in the face. Trask changed the subject, glanced at the people in the conference hall, and said firmly, unless there are mutants mixed in on our field. The small detection instrument turned slightly, and when the alarm sound became the maximum value, the detection antenna was aimed at Rui Wen, who was sitting in the main seat and disguised as a military officer. Chapter 552 The Turn of Things. Drop. The conference hall was silent, only the sound of detectors resounding quietly, pulling everyone's nervousness on the field. Scientist Trask tightly held a detector in his hand, looked at the military officer sitting opposite him, raised the corner of his mouth slightly, and said in a deep voice, "You can't be wrong, you are a mutant." As soon as this sentence came out, the faces of the other people attending the meeting changed, and their surprised eyes focused on the military chief. The military chief looked terrified, couldn't help standing up from his seat, and yelled strangely, "There must be something wrong with the equipment. How could I be a mutant? Tell me, my instrument will never go wrong." Mutants have many special abilities that we don't know about, and everyone in this field should know, as Trask said firmly. The two officers were dubious, and still surrounded the military chief, trying to subdue him temporarily. In any case, Ning made a mistake. Ruwan's eyes sharpened, her disguise was almost seen through, and there was no need for her to continue pretending. Following the transformation of the body surface, the barbed skin transformed, and the whole body returned to the original appearance of a red-haired, blue-skinned woman. The moment she returned to her real body without clothes, Rui Wen bowed left and right with both hands, and her movements were decisive and sharp, knocking the two officers who were close to her to the ground. Some congressmen and politicians had never seen such a scene, and fled out of the hall with pale faces. Seeing that the situation was not good, Trask kept backing his short body until his back touched the foot of the conference room. "Want to wipe out our mutants? Where are you going?" Taking out a special pistol from her waist, Ruwen looked indifferent, and jumped onto the round table, aiming the gun at Trask in front of her. The moment she was about to shoot, something unexpected happened. A Garfield suddenly jumped in from the window and hid her wrist with its head. The special pistol was thrown out of her hand and fell to the ground. "Cat!" Ruwen swept her eyes away, and just as she was surprised, the door of the conference hall suddenly opened, and Charles and his party walked in grandly. Seeing that Trask hadn't been shot yet, Charles, the leader of the team, knew that they had finally caught up, so he breathed a sigh of relief, then set his gaze on Ruwen, and said in a deep voice, "Ruwen, stop." "Charles, Eric, why are you here?" Ruwen was stunned. At this moment, an officer took out an electric shock device from her body and shot it at her neck. Ruwen groaned in pain, and immediately fell on the table and twitched her body continuously. "Ruwen!" Hank rushed forward, ignoring the current flowing from the grid transmitter, and tore the grid away from Ruwen with his bare hands. The current immediately paralyzed his body, causing Hank to fall to the ground instead. And Garfield looked at the officer holding the electric shock device, and his hair was blown all over. How could Logan from the future forget that this man in front of him would become a demon tormenting him to the point of death in the future? The Edmund metal in the body of the future is also infused into the bone marrow of the current man. Seeing that Charles and the others were on Ruben's side, the officer did not shoot anymore and fled hastily to the conference hall. Garfield hesitated for a while, but in the end he didn't chase after him in frustration. After all, with his weak cat body, he could only die if he chased him. Does this count as changing history? Young master, on the roof of the conference building, there were 3 people standing on the roof as Sazo turned his head and looked at Caesar, who was holding Kinbanan's little hand. It's still hard to say. Caesar narrowed his eyes, just like Azazo, always paying attention to what happened below. Trask was not killed, and the Sentinel project ended. Isn't this a success? Azazo had doubts on his face, but his words quickly weakened, thinking of a very crucial point. Charles and the others did prevent Trask from being shot, but Ruin attacked government officials in the conference hall. But it has become an unchangeable fact from Ruin. The government members saw the huge threat of mutants, and they might agree to start the Sentinel project because of this in the future. The future crisis has not been resolved, and the key point still lies in Ruin and the unfinished Sentinel. Caesar and Azazo were not the only ones who clearly thought of this. In a chaotic conference hall, Eric suddenly bent down, picked up the pistol on the ground, and aimed at Ruin, who was lying on the table. Charles, Garfield, Logan, Hank, who was gradually transformed by the electric shock, and Ruin, who was becoming sober from paralysis, were completely stunned by this reversal scene. "What are you doing?" "Eric, why did you point the gun at Raven?" Charles said in disbelief. "Charles, you know, this is the only solution at the moment." Eric glanced at Trask and was about to pull the trigger. Charles rushed forward in time and snatched the pistol away, not forgetting to shout, "Raven, run away. Eric wants to kill you." Under the desire to survive, Ruin quickly got up from the table and rushed towards the French windows. "It's late." Eric shook his head, grasping falsely with his left hand. The pistol snatched by Charles automatically pulled the trigger, and the bullets were fired under the control of the magnetic field. As if equipped with a positioning system, they chased after Ruin's head. "No!" Under Charles's desperate cry, Ruin smashed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, was shot on the back as she fell, and fell directly to the ground from a height of 10 meters. "My God, what is that humanoid monster?" The square outside the conference building was surrounded by a large number of people and the media. When they saw the strange-looking Ruin jumping from a high altitude and falling to the ground, there was a riot immediately. Many media immediately picked up their cameras and took pictures of Ruin, who was seriously injured. "Hank, save Raven!" Charles hugged Eric's hands tightly and yelled at Hank on the ground. I know." Hank's body muscles have swelled by half, and the whole body grows blue hair like a beast. The inhuman physique under the beast shape is no longer paralyzed. He directly throws the power grid in his hand, and leaps vigorously out of the broken floor-to-ceiling window. Another one, a werewolf? A lion? Under the exclamation of the crowd outside, Hank fell to the ground, ignoring the flashing lights of the media around him. Seeing Ruin, who was shot and injured, lying in a pool of blood, heartache appeared on his wild face. And he stretched out his hand to hug the princess. He picked her up. "Ruin, don't be afraid, I'll take you there for treatment. You'll be fine, get out of the way, all of you." Hank raised his eyes and looked coldly at the people surrounding the square. With the roar of the beast, the crowd panicked and gave way to a feasible passage. "Want to run? Leave them all to me." Eric's indifferent voice came from above, and with a medal on his shoes and belt, he floated down from the conference hall to the square outside, blocking Hank's way. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 553 Shot, Superman Caesar. "Whoever stops me will die." Holding Hank, who injured Ruin, his hair exploded, and he was completely reduced to a beast, shouting angrily at Eric in front of him. "You can try," Eric sneered, and stretched his hands to the sides, maximizing the ability to control the magnetic field. Under the bursts of exclamation caused by the people, the vehicles parked near the square, the metal canopy in the musical fountain, the temporary railings set up on the square, and even the guns in the hands of the armed soldiers who rushed here after shaking violently for a while, they all floated out of gravity and gathered towards the top of Eric's head under the traction of the magnetic field. Hateful. Hank was already in a state of anxiety, but when he saw Eric gathering the metal objects, he was forced to back up helplessly. Charles, who stayed in the conference hall, watched the turmoil in the square below through the window on the third floor, and looked anxiously at Garfield next to him. What should I do? Is there any way to stop him? Garfield didn't speak, and couldn't speak. His paws slapped the window several times in succession. Charles understood what Logan was conveying, covered his head with his hands, and said in pain, I know, but now I can't do it. Damn, I can't do it. Is it really worth it to give up your own different abilities for the sake of a pair of legs that normal people have? For the first time, Charles questioned himself in his heart. He didn't want to have the mutant ability until he needed it, but no matter how regretful it is now, it is useless. From the moment Eric shot, things were a foregone conclusion. On the roof of the conference building, looking down at the square below, Azazel couldn't help sighing. Eric is serious this time, and basically no one can change the decision he made. Now that Charles is incapacitated, Hank alone cannot, while escaping, protect Ruwen, who was shot and unconscious. He paused, and continued, Eric also scattered metal particles all over the air in the square to prevent me from making a move. Even if I use the teleportation ability to come to Hank and the others now, I can't take them all safely. Teleport away. This game of chess is basically a dead end. However, sacrificing Ruwen alone in exchange for future peace may be an ending that most people can accept. Azazel looked at Caesar next to him, and said in a low voice, Young master, do you think so? Caesar didn't answer. He lowered his head and reached out to touch Kin's little head. Kin narrowed her eyes comfortably. The current dispute was too far away for her, as long as she curled up beside Caesar all the time. It's over. Raven, Hank. Eric lowered his eyes and pressed his hands forward at the same time. The metal objects that were suspended in the air suddenly smashed towards Hank densely and quickly like hail. There are so many, there is no way to escape. Looking at the many falling objects, Hank smiled bitterly, looked down at Ruwen, who was in a coma, and whispered with relief, but that's it. It doesn't seem like a big deal to die with you. No, Raven. Despite thinking so in his heart, Hank bent down at the last moment, using his body as a shield to protect Raven in his arms. And then, the next moment, boom boom boom. Cars, railings, iron nets, etc., all kinds of messy metal objects converged into a torrent of steel and fell down. The astonishing scene of this ability was recorded by a large number of media reporters around in photo and video formats, and became a bright page in the book of history. But what surprised the world even more was what happened next. Huh? Eric frowned, obviously feeling the metal of control, and was intercepted at the end, and did not fall on Hank and Ruwen. This is how the same thing. Hank, who hugged Ruwen, opened his eyes. When he saw the tall figure thrown on the ground, he was shocked and looked back quickly. I saw Caesar standing near behind him, holding a truck with his hands, and the rest of the fallen metal objects piled up to the size of a hill. Teacher Kaiser. Tears almost filled Hank's eyes. It's not that he has never seen Caesar make a move, but Caesar would not make a move in front of outsiders, let alone interfere and intervene in some major events. But this time, in front of the whole world, when he and Ruwen were about to die, Caesar still broke the principles he set. I can't help it either. Ken is watching. Caesar shook his head helplessly, and said calmly, if you don't save the disciples from the past, all the bottom lines of principles will be meaningless. Taking a deep breath, Caesar pushed the metal hill and threw it high, but he didn't see him make any movements. The metal piled up into the mountain continued to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye. Kneed the 10-meter-high metal mountain directly into the size of a football. Caesar fiddled with his left and right hands a few times, threw it up slightly, and kicked it forward at high speed with his right foot. Eric, this one is for you. The compressed small metal ball broke the sound barrier, and the air exploded layer by layer. Eric stretched his hands forward and tried his best to control the magnetic field, but he still couldn't stop the metal ball, and could only slightly shake its moving track. Call out. The metal ball deflected slightly upwards and passed over Eric's head dangerously. After breaking through the monument on the square, it sank into the sky without slowing down and became a black spot until it disappeared without a trace. Cold sweat dripped from Eric's pale face, and he was almost about to be hit by the metal ball. Caesar turned to him and asked, do you want to continue, Eric? Teacher Kaiser, I will call you teacher one last time, Eric said in a deep voice, You should understand the consequences of Ruin's immortality. Also, the consequences of exposing your superhuman abilities in public this time may be even more serious. I know. Caesar glanced at the sluggish onlookers around him, and sighed softly. Feeling that his days of peace were coming to an end, he raised his hand and waved towards the roof of the conference building. A ball of red flames glowed in the square, and Asazo appeared from it, putting his hands on Hank and Ruin respectively. Young master, I will take them to treat their wounds first. Just finished speaking. Asazo took Hank and Ruin and teleported away under a mass of red flames. Knowing that once Caesar made a move, everything would be settled, Eric manipulated the magnetic field to fly out of the square and fled. The world is going to be chaotic. Caesar sighed softly in his heart, swayed his body, flew to the rooftop at a high speed, and stretched out his hand towards Kin. Let's go, Kin. Kin smiled like a flower, and jumped into Caesar's arms. After Caesar hugged her, he levitated upwards and quickly flew away, leaving behind an uproar in the meeting square. Chapter 554 World Sensation. Although Caesar and the others left, the aftermath that remained caused an epic sensation in Paris. This day must also be recorded in history. If say a few years ago the most primitive X-Men squad fought against mutants staged in front of warships of various countries in the Hellfire Club, letting a small part of the world know the existence of mutants. This time, Ruin, Hank, Eric, Caesar, and Asazo fought in a short but extraordinary battle in a Paris square surrounded by countless people, and under the eyes of media from all over the world. Completely exposed the existence of mutants to the world. In less than half a day, discussions about this battle had covered the entire urban area of Paris, and media reporters from all walks of life in various countries are scrambling to be the first to widely report this important event through newspapers, radio, and television. There is no need to exaggerate the content of the report, just describing the facts is enough to shock the world. Seeing that the report was completely released to the world, the U.S. government agencies deeply felt that they could no longer keep the news closed, and could no longer conceal the information about the existence of mutants from the public, so they could only take the initiative to disclose the identities of the mutants who appeared in the square, and focused on Ruin and Eric issued a wanted warrant. Magneto King Eric Landshear, a German Jew, once entered a concentration camp. His mutant ability is magnetic field control, and he can manipulate any metal for his own use. The state specially made non-metallic guns and underground prisons for him. He is the founder of the Mutant Brotherhood, once attacked the former U.S. president, and is the most dangerous and powerful mutant terrorist. Mystique Raven Duckholm, who grew up in the United States, has a mutant ability of camouflage, which can pretend to be anyone she has ever seen, and can even reproduce fingerprints and internal genes, a dangerous element with antisocial personality and a core member of the Brotherhood of Mutants. The Red Devil Azazo has a mutant ability of teleportation, which can take people to a distance of, kilometers. Once a member of the Hellfire Club, he is now suspected to be Caesar's personal butler. Beast Hank McCoy, with a mutant ability of beastization, has a powerful aggressive physique like a beast. He used to be a scientist at the CIA Research Center and is now Professor Charles' personal butler. After the above personal information was announced to the world, it once again caused an uproar, and the topic of mutants rose to the hottest topic in history. Of course, there is also a personal information. After the government released it to the public, almost everyone was shocked and speechless. Superman Caesar, birth unknown, family unknown, mutant ability unknown. He can fly at supersonic speed, his strength is unknown, he can easily carry 100 tons of objects, his 5 senses are unknown, his speed is unknown, and his physique is unknown. He lived with Professor Charles when he was young, and later won the title of British Knight. Access to banquets and bars around the world. In view of Caesar's identity and ability, even government agencies dare not issue arrest warrants easily. What level of personal information is this? The Superman generation, the official generation, the rich generation? Is this still a human being? It's clearly a god, right? All of a sudden, reports and topics about Caesar were overwhelming, and it rose to the top of the hot topic in a short period of time, and once overwhelmed the discussion about the danger of mutants. Some people even regarded Caesar as a god, and most of them were women. This caused the governments of big countries to hold meetings one after another to discuss how to deal with powerful mutants like Caesar. If even the governments of big countries cannot suppress mutants, wouldn't mutants be above the law and the world? This is undoubtedly a devastating blow to the legal society. U.S. Imperial White House, presidential meeting. Although this meeting was held urgently, it was hosted by the current president, with the participation of senior generals and members of parliament. It could be said to be a meeting that could affect the entire world. The president frowned, glanced at everyone in the conference room, and asked in a deep voice, "Is that Caesar really powerful? Even the national military can't suppress it, Your Excellency. It's not a question of whether he's great or not." When the generals and congressmen were silent, the current chief of the CIA stood up, took out several files in his hand, and replied, "I have several in-depth investigations on Caesar. I can feel his ability intuitively. Let me see." The president beckoned, and the secretary immediately put the file on the desktop in front of him. He picked up the first file with a photo, and was stunned when he saw it. I saw that it was a space aerial photo. The blue Earth was glowing with halo, and a shallow figure was standing outside the space. The CIA chief smiled bitterly and said, "Yes, that is Caesar. Aerial satellites have photographed him many times. At first we thought it was an alien. I knew he could fly, but I didn't expect that he could fly into outer space." The corners of the president's eyes twitched. "This is not scientific at all." The CIA chief sighed. "As long as he wants, let alone outer space, even the moon can go in and out at will." The president continued to scroll down and found the photo taken in the square yesterday, the famous scene of Caesar holding the metal hill with both hands. The CIA chief spread his hands and said, "For him, the small mountain is like we pick up a small stone. If he wants, he can move mountains and fill the sea at will. Isn't it God?" The president put down the files tremblingly, and slumped on the chair as the chair. This was the first time he was helpless and deeply afraid of a person. "God? You can also say that." The CIA chief sat back. The president was silent for a moment, looked at the officers wearing badges and uniforms, and asked, "Generals, if we use our military power, can we?" No officer dared to answer casually, "Yes." Facing Caesar, they didn't have any confidence. At this moment, an officer raised his hand and said, "President, I know someone. Maybe he can give you the answer you want." "Who?" the president asked. "Come in, Trask," the officer called to the conference room door. In response to his shout, the door of the meeting room opened, and a middle-aged man in a suit and uniform, as short as a child, stepped in. Trask bowed to the president and said, "Mr. President, officers and congressmen, hello everyone. I am the head and scientist of the Sentinel Project, Project Sentinel," the president muttered in surprise. Trask smiled and said seriously, "Yes. Just yesterday, in the square. After getting the blood left by a certain mutant, I finally completely perfected the research and plan for the Sentinels. At this time Africa, somewhere in a dimly lit basement." Tianqi sat cross-legged on the floor covered with blankets, closed his eyes and meditated. After the basement door opened, an African obediently placed a newspaper on the floor in front of him. After a while, Tianqi opened his eyes, white light flashed in his eyes, he looked down at the newspaper, full of reports about Caesar, Magneto and others, with a vaguely strange smile on his dark blue face. Finally found. Chapter 555 4 Nights, The Stairway to God. Paris, the bustling downtown streets. The topic of mutants is still buzzing in the streets and alleys. Some citizens held signs requesting the deportation and exclusion of mutants, fearing the mutants hiding in the dark. However, some people took to the streets wearing t-shirts with pictures of Caesar, supporting the peaceful coexistence of mutants and ordinary people. Suddenly, various conflicts and contradictions continued to occur. The sky seemed to be infected by this atmosphere, with dark clouds all over, and a huge storm was coming. A girl dressed in a non-mainstream way put her hands in her pockets, chewing gum, walking aimlessly on the street, often interspersed among the bustling and dense crowd. No one noticed that when she passed some well-dressed people, she stretched out her left hand like lightning, and used a sharp knife to cut through other people's backpacks or pockets, stealing the mobile phones and wallets inside. After a while, the non-mainstream girl's pockets were bulging and filled with trophies. She left the crowded street and came to a remote alley without camera monitoring. The non-mainstream girl was squatting on the ground, just taking stock of what she had just gained, when a calm and exciting voice suddenly sounded behind her. "My child, with your extraordinary ability, there is no need to do such a thing." The non-mainstream girl was startled, and turned around to look, only to see a mysterious strange man with dark blue skin and retro clothes looking at her kindly. "Who are you?" The non-mainstream girl vigilantly took out a knife and held it in front of her. Tianqi smiled and said, "I am the god of the old age. You can call me Lord Tianqi. Master Shayanki? What is it? The non-mainstream girl frowned, and at this moment, the figure of the policeman appeared at the entrance of the alley. When the middle-aged policeman saw the two of them, he immediately took out his pistol and shouted, "Police! You two, raise your hands immediately, it's really unlucky." The non-mainstream girl gave Bianchi an unlucky look, spit out the gum in her mouth, threw the knife on the ground, and raised her hands high to face the police. "And you?" the middle-aged policeman shouted at the indifferent Shayanki. A mere mortal, Tianqi shook his head lightly, raised his left hand, and in the next moment, the pistol in the policeman's hand disintegrated into countless parts, rattling and scattered all over the ground. "Go with it." Tianqi stretched out his finger, and the body of the policeman who was about to escape was suspended and submerged into the outer wall of the building next to him. The wall sealed his body like a swamp, leaving only a mural of a real person screaming with his mouth wide open. "Who the hell are you?" The non-mainstream girl sat down on the floor of the alley with a pale face. "Shayanki." Shayanki smiled slightly, and pushed in the direction of the girl, as if injecting something into her body. The non-mainstream girl fell to the ground and struggled in pain. With her screams, white lightning began to wake up on her body and flow away. At the same time, the dark clouds in the sky continued to press down, the thunder roared, and the lightning struck the street lamps around the alley like a dragon and snake, scaring many passers-by to scream and run away. "What's wrong with me?" the non-mainstream girl asked with her eyes flickering and looking down at the hands wrapped in electric current. "My child, you have power comparable to nature, and you are above the sky. Follow me from now on, and let me create a new world ruled by gods." Tianqi looked at her peacefully, and said, "Now, you can tell me, have you got your name, Master Apocalypse?" "My name is Orala Monroe, Storm Girl." Storm Girl knelt on one knee and said respectfully, "Let's go." Shayanki opened a group of purple energy portals casually, and extended an inviting hand to Storm Girl. "Lord Shayanki, where are we going?" Storm Girl stood up, wondering. "Collect the 4 knights. You are one of them, and there are 3 others. When the 4 knights are in place, the whole world will surrender at our feet." After Tianqi finished speaking, he walked towards the portal first, followed by Storm Girl. Gifted Youth Academy, the former site of the teaching building. On a big white bed on the 3rd floor, Rui Wen was lying on it. Her upper body had already been bandaged, and the connected medical equipment showed a stable heart rate. Charles, Hank, Asazo, and Garfield are all in this room. "Ruwen, is she okay?" Charles asked softly, staring at Ruwen, who was still in a coma. Hank, who turned back into a human body, pushed his glasses and replied, "The first aid went well. She is out of danger, but she needs to recuperate for a while. Since she is wanted outside, I asked Asazo to move her away. Come back here." Charles looked at Azazo, who was leaning against the window with Garfield, and said, "Azazo, you make a move, is it okay?" Asazo understood what he meant, nodded and said, "The young master asked me to take action. He doesn't know where he is now. During this period, I will stay with you, if my ability is still needed." "That's good. Now we have not many people who can be used as combat power." Charles sighed softly, and walked outside, but only halfway there, his feet suddenly kept moving, and he staggered forward and fell to the ground. Charles, Hank hurried over to help Charles up, and Garfield also jumped to his side, looking at him anxiously. "My legs." Charles stared blankly at his legs that were constantly losing consciousness, and said impatiently, "Hank, the effect of the last medicine is almost over. Bring me the medicine. Hurry up." "Yes." Hank hurried up to the 4th floor, and hurriedly took off a spectroscope. Like a drug-addicted patient, Charles snatched the syringe and was about to inject it into his arm vein, but Garfield suddenly jumped onto his lap and looked straight at him. "I understand what you mean. But, how can you guarantee that after losing my legs, my abilities can be recovered?" Looking at Garfield, Charles showed pain on his face, and hurriedly said, "I have lost enough things." Garfield jumped off the ground, slapped the floor, and conveyed his message. "So, there is no more to lose?" Charles was silent. He raised his head, looked at Ruwen lying on the bed, and then looked at the spectrometer in his hand, hesitated again and again, and finally put down the syringe in despondency. "Professor Charles," Hank looked at him with relief. "I think of a sentence that the young master said before." Azazel also smiled, looked at Charles, who was sitting on the ground, and said with emotion, he said, "If there is a God in the world, the person who is closest to the God is not him, but you. Professor Charles, in the hinterland of the Atlantic Ocean, on a remote desert island. A 2-story log cabin was newly built next to the beach forest. Caesar, who caused a world sensation, was wearing sunglasses at this time, and while lying on the sun lounger in front of the log cabin, he taught Ken, who was wearing a swimsuit, to swim in the sea. Mr. Caesar, don't I want to learn how to control my ability? Why do I want to learn to swim? Ken asked curiously with her eyes wide open after being washed up on the beach by the waves. Caesar yawned and said, it's because you were too obsessed with control before, so you often lost control. You just need to do other things you want to do and adapt to the power you have naturally. I used to be like this too, okay? Ken pursed her mouth and plunged into the clear seawater again. Caesar took off his sunglasses, looked at the blue sky, and said to himself, the calm before the storm. Chapter 556 returned Professor X and Logan. Inside the teaching building of the Academy for Gifted Youth. I brought this down from upstairs, it should come in handy. A ball of coquettish red flames glowed in the corridor on the 3rd floor, and a Sazo appeared from it, and placed a special wheelchair firmly on the floor. Charles, who was sitting softly on the ground, was covered with sweat on his pale face. He looked at the wheelchair in front of him with nostalgia in his eyes. He didn't expect to go back to the wheelchair after going around. Come on, Professor, slow down. Hank turned into a blue-haired human-shaped beast, stretched out his strong hands, helped Charles up, and slowly sent him into the wheelchair. I'll get you another glass of water. Hank turned around and was about to walk towards the hall, but Charles stopped him. No need, Professor, you. Sazo's eyes were fixed on him, with a beast-like sense, which made him keenly aware that Charles at this time was very different from before. Charles rested his hand on the armrest of the wheelchair and looked towards the hall at the end of the corridor. In the next moment, a cup filled with plain water flew over in suspension and landed lightly on his open left palm. Professor. Your ability. Hank's eyes were slightly red. At this moment, they seemed to have a pillar, and this college seemed to have returned to the true core soul. Yes. My ability is back. Charles' magnetic voice sounded steadily in the minds of everyone in the academy. He was not agitated, but calm as a professor. Garfield jumped onto Charles's lap, and Charles stared at it. In a short moment, his face showed a bit of comprehension and understanding. It turns out that you are the one who came from the future, Logan. In the future, Logan rolled around excitedly. He has been in this cat body, watching the situation continue to develop in a bad way, which can be regarded as aggrieved. No way, he's the future Logan. Hank and Sazo looked at each other. Both of them couldn't react. The contrast was too exaggerated. It can't be wrong. From the memory of his brain, I also saw the light and shadow of the doomsday in the future, as well as myself. Charles nodded in thought for a while. Logan, according to your situation, it is only due to a deviation in the transfer of consciousness. Through the brain expansion machine, maybe I can temporarily cover your consciousness in the current era with your consciousness boarded on the cat original body. Garfield's eyes lit up. He had had enough of this useless body. Hank. Charles' voice sounded in Hank's brain, and Hank understood what he meant, and said with a smile, Professor, I'm really not used to your sudden recovery of abilities. Don't worry, I have been maintaining that place, and now it can be considered useful, the basement of the teaching building of the college. The underground space below is very spacious, and the teaching building above is only the tip of the iceberg. There is a parking area for high-end stealth fighters, a combat simulation training room with special materials, and an important room with an X-shaped security door in the deepest part. Room. Hank led the crowd here, looked at Charles who was pushing the wheel forward. Professor, the inside is specially built for you, and only your authority can enter. Charles continued to push the wheel forward, put his hand on the doorknob, verified by fingerprints and laser scanning. And the bulletproof safety door automatically opened to both sides. Inside is a straight and lengthy passage. At the end of the passage, there is a mechanical helmet, which is connected to the antenna of the entire room. The inner wall of the room with a circular structure is a seamless LCD screen. Every time I come here, I'm always a little excited, Hank said with emotion. Few people know to what extent Charles' telepathic abilities can be achieved under the augmentation of the brain expansion machine. If Hank really had to describe it, it would be one step away from God. Charles pushed the wheelchair, picked up the helmet, blew off the dust accumulated on it, and put it on his head solemnly. It's been a long time under everyone's gaze. This room seems to have obtained the most critical chip, fully functioning, and the boundless starry sky is displayed on the screen. In the starry sky, there are many colorless and a few radiant shadows. The ones with light represent mutants, and the ones without light represent ordinary people. The current professor can freely manipulate the bodies of ordinary people, rewrite their memories, and even kill them directly with his mind. Hank explained softly. Professor, find out where Logan is at this point in time. Charles didn't speak, and used his sensing ability to trace back along the starry sky, and soon locked onto a bright light and shadow. I found it. Logan, you are now locked up in a military research base in the United States. You are in pain. Your body, it seems to have been injected with something. Garfield opened his eyes wide, seemed to realize something, and yelled anxiously at Charles. I understand. Charles lowered his left hand, stroking Garfield's head, and transmitted Logan's consciousness residing in the cat's body. Garfield shuddered, looked around everyone in shock, and then fled out of the door in a panic. Logan, Hank watched Garfield leave. Charles said softly, he's at the place where he should go, and we may meet soon. Now, let's find out where Eric is. The matter of the Sentinel is still unresolved. A town in the United States, a train station. Passengers came and went in the train station. Eric wore a hat and a mask and walked out of the station with his luggage. At this moment, an ant blocked his way. The ant said mechanically with a blank face, Eric, running away won't solve the problem. Eric's pupils contracted violently, and he blurted out, Charles. Yes, the ant nodded. It's you who has been running away, but I've never run away. Eric snorted coldly, and walked away from the ant with his luggage. Now that you have regained your ability, we can use each other's methods to solve the Sentinel matter. The ant's hazy eyes regained clarity, and she frowned, not knowing why she stood there in a daze for a while. A teenager passed by Eric and said inexplicably, Eric, your way won't work. It's better than standing still. Eric continued to walk out. A man walked towards him and accidentally bumped into Eric. While apologizing, he picked up the unfinished topic. I have seen a corner of the doomsday future. Mutants must live in peace with ordinary people, because what you see is a future of failure. Eric pushes the man away and walks out of the train station through a fake IDX basement. Charles sighed helplessly. He didn't listen to my advice, but he had already expected that Eric was that kind of person. Even if he was an enemy of the whole world, he would insist on going his own way and do what he thought was right. Azazel asked curiously, Professor, can you find the young master? Charles was silent for a moment, and said, it is theoretically possible, because his thoughts are too dazzling. Even if I don't look for them deliberately, I will accidentally see him. But I can't see him now. There is an unknown and disordered telepathic field around him, blocked my telepathy. Han Kemming realized, it's the little girl he brought, who can actually interfere with you in this state. Yes, Charles nodded. At this moment, he suddenly saw something unbelievable, and said with a pale face, wait a minute, what is that? I saw a mysterious mutant whose aura is not inferior to that of Caesar. Chapter 557 The Awakened Magneto King. Charles took off the mechanical helmet, dripping with cold sweat. His bangs stuck to his forehead. His hands on the armrests of the wheelchair were already firmly clenched into fists, obviously in a highly tense negative state. Just now, even the system of the brain expansion machine was a little unstable, just like when you detected and traced the consciousness of Teacher Kaiser before. The feedback signal exceeded the limit value that this machine can bear. Hank swallowed in surprise, supported Charles back, and couldn't help but ask, Professor Charles, what did you see just now? Alone, Charles took a few deep breaths to calm down the horror in his heart, and then organized his words. Yes. A powerful mutant who has never been seen before. He is very similar to Caesar's aura, but very different. If we say, Caesar's aura is like the sun, bright and warm. I saw that person's consciousness aura, like a black hole, cold and dark, trying to absorb my consciousness completely. Who is that? Azazel narrowed his eyes. How could someone as strong as Caesar exist? I didn't see it clearly. Charles shook his head and said in shock, he wants to destroy the world. This idea has not been concealed at all, and it is completely exposed outside the halo that surrounds him. I dare not get too close. Just a moment before he took off his helmet, he seemed to sense that I was spying on him. Hank couldn't help but let out a sigh. The matter of the Sentinels hasn't been resolved yet, and there is another powerful mutant who wants to destroy the world? This world is really full of disasters. There's no time to complain. Charles frowned tightly, pondering. I saw just now that Eric is near the New Jersey train station. There are many secret military bases around it, and it is the only way for trains running important military weapons and equipment. I suspect that Eric I want to shoot. Destroy, or control the Sentinel weapon researched by the US military. It's totally his style, Hank said helplessly. It's a pity that Rue-1 is still unconscious now, and someone must stay to protect her. Professor Charles, it's best for you to stay, but Azazel and I are not enough to stop Eric. Charles nodded, and said firmly, so, we need to find helpers, enough helpers. Late that night, near the New Jersey railway station, on the rails of the circular mountain road, a train carrying military equipment whistled and roared past the rails at high speed. Eric, who had been waiting for a long time, suddenly appeared from the nearby mountain, jumped down, and landed firmly on the roof of the train. Cool. Eric kept his balance and stood up, looking at the rows of closed carriages below. He stretched out his hands and grasped them a little bit. Kakakaka, the bulletproof steel train carriage groaned. The screws bounced off, the steel bars twisted and broke, and a large piece of the roof at the rear of the train was directly lifted off. Eric's blue veins protruded, driving the magnetic field to lift the roof of the car and throw it to the cliff outside the railroad track. Without the cover of the car roof, the items carried in the car can be seen at a glance. It was a silver robot, 2 meters tall, obviously a mechanical dead thing, but exuding an aura that suffocated the mutants. They were neatly placed in the carriage row by row. Is this the Sentinel? Eric's eyes were shining brightly. If he was allowed to master the Sentinel core, it would not be difficult at all to solve the superpower and create a world of mutants. Just when Eric was about to move the Sentinel away, a group of red flames suddenly glowed behind him. He turned his head vigilantly, and saw several people wearing X-Men uniforms appearing on the top of the train. You are. Eric's pupils shrank slightly, and the people who came were basically acquaintances he knew before. The first one was Hank, who turned into a blue-haired orc. The second one was Logan, whose hair exploded, and the third one was Ah, who sent them over. Sazo. The fourth place is a tall young man with an opening on the chest of his battlesuit. He is the strongest student of the first batch of gifted youths, Shockwave Alex Summers. Eric, stop what you're doing. Logan took the lead to take a step forward. He was Logan from the future, and his consciousness was finally covered on the original body of the current era, which made him feel extremely comfortable. Oh? You are indeed different from before. Eric seemed to feel something, and he raised his hand, and Logan, who was in the front, flew out immediately, rolled several times continuously on the high-speed train, and finally stretched out 3 sharp steel claws, inserted into the shell of the train body. Thrill stop. The other 3 have black lines all over their heads. They are so handsome for only 3 seconds. I almost forgot, Logan yelled, and then he remembered that his body had been injected with Edmund metal in advance, and the bones in his body were no longer bone. The strength has been greatly enhanced, but this body is easier to deal with than that Garfield in front of Eric. Let me see. Caesar, what did he teach you? Eric flipped his hands over, and a large iron plate immediately smashed towards several people. I come. Alex stepped forward and stood in front of everyone. He straightened his chest, and a red energy beam shot out from his body, instantly piercing and melting the iron plate that hid him. The energy beam continued to go red, forcing Eric to go side to dodge. It's now. Hank kept holding Azazel's hand. After he prompted, Azazel used his ability to lead him away from behind Alex. The next moment, the red flame glowed behind Eric, and Hank pounced out of it, strangled Eric's neck with his strong hands, and rubbed him against the roof of the train. Damn. Eric raised his hand with difficulty, trying to manipulate the sentry, but Alex walked up to him and aimed his energy-emitting chest at him. Stop, don't force me. Logan stood up again, stepped forward, and said in a deep voice, Eric, you can't win, because you only have one person, and we are a team. Are you just letting them make sentries? Sentinels are the weapons that will destroy us in the future. Eric's eyes were bloodshot, his hands clenched into fists, and he punched the roof of the car with one fist, giving up the meaningless struggle. In the face of 4 mutants with rich experience in fighting against the enemy, no matter how powerful they are, there is a limit. Logan shook his head and said, of course we will not let the future be ignored. Just using violence to control violence will never solve the real problem. Eric had a cold face and didn't speak. Hank suggested, take him back to the professor. I'll take care of the funeral, okay? Azazel nodded and put his hands on Eric, but before he teleported away, a group of purple flames suddenly glowed on the top of the train, and several mysterious people walked from it. Found it? The mysterious man at the head stared at Eric, who was subdued by everyone, and calmly said, the 4th night. My child. Chapter 558. The Apocalypse Strikes. on the roof of a train traveling at high speed between winding mountain roads. The X-Men team that subdued Eric tensed up, looking vigilantly at the Apocalypse 4 who appeared suddenly, not knowing the origin and intentions of the other party. The leading middle-aged man is tall and generous, with a strange appearance and a mysterious black-gray cloak. Among them are two young women. One is a girl with a ponytail and a non-mainstream dress, the other is a dignified and beautiful Asian woman, and there is a white young man with steel wings and cold eyes. It is the resuscitated Apocalypse, and the three knights he selected from all over the world, Storm, Spirit Butterfly, and Archangel. With the awakening boost bestowed by the Apocalypse, the three mutants have an extremely powerful aura lingering around them. Be careful, I can feel that he is extremely dangerous, and he is not on the same level as the previous enemies. Logan's hair stood on end, he clenched his fists, stretched out three sharp steel blades, and actively blocked his body from the crowd in front. I will cover your retreat. You come from that place. Don't you know who he is? Hank asked Logan, still holding Eric tightly. I don't know. Logan shook his head, looked directly at Apocalypse, and whispered solemnly like never before, I've never seen him before. If such a powerful enemy exists in this era, the professors should remind me. Don't worry about them. Alex stepped forward domineeringly, facing Shayanki and his party, and asked, who are you and what are you doing here? I'm here, not looking for you. I'm looking for him. Shayanki lowered his eyes and stretched out a finger, pointing at Eric who was rubbed under Hank's body. Sorry, he's ours. Alex spread out his hands, accumulating energy in his chest, ready to fight at any time. Have I become the target of competition? Eric couldn't help complaining. He was also secretly examining the forces of both sides. He thought it was the Brotherhood of Mutants who had come, but he didn't know any of Shayanki and the others, so he didn't know what to do with him. Hank gave Asazuo a glance and said in a low voice, Asazuo, these people are difficult to deal with. You take Eric back to the professor first, and then come back to meet us, understood? Asazuo nodded earnestly, with his hands resting quietly on Eric's shoulders, as if sensing their intentions. Shayanki tilted his neck slightly, watching Asazuo's small movements, his deep eyes suddenly glowing with daylight. Asazuo exerted his ability and wanted to take Eric away, but he was quickly stunned, and his face changed drastically. What's the matter? I can't teleport away. It seems that there is an unknown area here, blocking the way of teleportation. This is the first time I have encountered this situation. Can't teleport away. Hank's eyes widened in surprise. Logan and Alex turned their attention to Tianqi and the others. This strange phenomenon can only be caused by the other party's ability in secret. Storm raised her chin and said proudly, of course, what is in front of you is the Supreme God. Then don't blame me. Following the idea of attacking first, Alex suddenly pushed his chest forward, and a crimson scorching energy beam shot out from his body immediately, blasting towards the four of Apocalypse. In an instant, the mountain wilderness at night all illuminated extremely brightly. The three knights, including the Archangel, had no intention of avoiding them, and stood still, watching the powerful energy light approaching. Just the moment before the energy beam fell, Shayanki waved his hand lightly. Under the astonished eyes of the X-Men team, the red energy beam was blocked by more powerful energy, and refracted slightly off the original track. The energy rays bombarded the mountain beside the railroad tracks, and gravel and mud splashed in all directions, setting off a raging fire. Logan also shot forward at the same time, but he was imprisoned by Tianqi's palm when he walked halfway. The steel roof of the train seemed to have turned into a quagmire, sinking his entire body into it, making it difficult to move no matter how hard he struggled. You guy. Alex gritted his teeth, trying to re-emit the energy light, but with a slight movement of Shayanki's palm, he was slapped away like a fly in the air, and beside the high-speed train was a cliff. Alex, at the very moment, Hank let go of Eric who was holding him down, leaped, and caught Alex in the air. The two hugged each other like this, rolled and fell towards the cliff. Spike. It was a real instant kill, against the experienced X-Men squad. Almost all members were defeated in just 5 seconds, and the only one who really shot was Shayanki, Logan, Hank, Alex. Asazuo's body trembled violently, but the space was imprisoned, unable to use the teleportation ability. No matter how anxious he was helpless. Cough cough. Eric coughed a few times, touched his neck, stood up from the top of the train, stared at Tianqi solemnly and asked, what do you want me for? Apocalypse replied contagiously, there is no need for the current superpower to exist. Now that I have recovered, I must become an immortal god. Child, You are the best candidate for the fourth knight. Although Eric was puzzled, he still walked towards Shayanki. Yes, knight. Child, you have great potential, but you haven't fully awakened yet. Let me help you. Shayanki nodded, and in order to express his sincerity, he directly stretched out his palm and grabbed Eric. Eric felt that the blood in his body, and even his genes, were restless at this moment, and his knees fell to the ground softly, uttering a howl of agony. Recalling the anger, and when you first awakened your ability when you were a child, Apocalypse bestowed a boost to Eric, muttering softly to guide. Eric kneeling on the train had a ferocious face, with blue veins protruding like dragon snakes, and he stretched out his palms with difficulty and firmness. Yes, that's it, Shayanki continued to guide. Eric yelled. Woo! The train where everyone was on trembled violently, and then it broke off the rails, carrying everyone suspended in mid-air. Then, under the traction of the super-strong magnetic field, the railway tracks with a radius of 1 kilometer began to break, several mountains collapsed with a bang, and countless gravel and dust flew upwards. This scene can be called a doomsday scene. God, he's amazing, the Archangel couldn't help but exclaimed, and finally understood why Shayanki had to recruit Eric. Magneto, worthy of the name. On the other side, it was still a sunny southern island. Caesar and Kin are sitting on the reef, one big and one small, holding bamboo poles respectively, apparently fishing leisurely by the sea. Teacher, Kin shook her little hand holding the bamboo pole. What, did you catch a fish? Caesar asked, yawning. No. Kin shook her head and said doubtfully, but I vaguely heard some howling, and I don't know where it came from. Oh? Are you finally willing to show up? There was a flash of light in Caesar's eyes, and he muttered in a low voice, then reached out and rubbed Kin's little head. Don't think about being lazy. Keep fishing until you catch 3 fish, or let alone training. The fish you catch won't be enough for you to eat. Yes, Kin pouted aggrievedly, and continued to calm down and go fishing. Chapter 559 Doomsday? Boom, the train fell on the rails again, the gravel rained, and the dust filled the mountains. Magneto King Eric regained his composure, slowly stood up from the ground, bowed his head respectfully towards Shayanki and said, Who are you, Shayanki? Just add me, Lord Shayanki, Shayanki said calmly. Yes, Master Shayanki, Eric nodded. It was the second time he was convinced by a person, the last time was Caesar. Come on, my 4 knights. Tianqi waved his hand lightly, opened the purple portal, and finally glanced at Logan and Azazel who were still on the train, looked at Eric and said, I'll leave them to you to handle. After finishing speaking, he took the rest of the 3 knights step into the portal first. Eric looked at Logan and Azazel, and raised his hands. Logan thought that Eric wanted to deal with them, but Eric's target was only the Sentinel prototype on the train. Under the manipulation of the amplified magnetic field, Eric, dozens of hundreds of Sentinels flew out of the train carriages. You guys take care of yourself. Eric dropped a sentence coldly, carried the Sentinel, and entered the purple portal together. After the purple portal disappeared, only the collapsed mountains, railroad tracks, and abandoned trains remained in place. Drink. Logan used his steel claws to cut open the iron plate that restrained him, and with a burst of sparks flying, he struggled to stand up from the roof of the train. Logan, I can't save Hank and the others. Azazel knelt on the ground and slammed his fists into the train. Logan looked down at him and sighed. It's not your fault. Those people are really too strong. It's fine if we didn't subdue Eric, and lost Hank and Alex. How should we go back and explain to the professor? Azazel and Logan were silent, and when they were in grief, a blue flame glowed from the top of the train, and 3 figures emerged from the flames. Okay, Azazel and Logan looked in surprise, and the 2 of the 3 were not Hank who fell off the cliff just now, and Alex. They were supported by a blue-skinned mutant youth with pointed ears and a tail. Are you all right? Azazel quickly got up, surprised. I almost fell to my death, but this friend saved our lives. Hank exhaled and patted the mutant youth on the shoulder. Alex was equally grateful. Thanks, we owe you our lives. You're welcome, the mutant youth said flatteredly. My name is Nightcrawler. Ruwan asked me to come. I am her friend, and she also saved my life. Logan raised his brows and asked curiously, wait, Nightcrawler, what is your ability? Instant teleportation. Nightcrawler scratched his head and replied. Others cast strange eyes on Azazel. In any case, the 2 have similar sharp ears and tails, and almost identical abilities. No matter how you look at them, they are inextricably linked. What do you see me doing? I'm not messing around. Azazel was a little guilty, glared at them, and return to the topic. Think about what to do first. Eric left with a sentry, and suspected of joining the team led by Shayanki. You also saw it just now. With the super strength of those people, they might really be able to destroy the world, Hanka suggested. Let's talk about it when we go back to school. We can only see what the professor has to deal with. In the dead of night, the moonlight fell on the teaching building of the Academy for Gifted Youth. At this time, the hall on the third floor was very lively. Charles is sitting in a wheelchair, facing the window. In front of him are the returned X-Men, as well as the revived Raven and the newly joined Nightcrawler. When the X-Men team returned, they told Charles about the apocalypse. Charles fell into deep thought, thinking, it can't be wrong. Apocalypse, it should be the person who saw the halo of consciousness like a black hole before me. In fact, after you set off, Agent Moore of the CIA called me. She said that Apocalypse was the first mutant 10,000 years ago, and he was also the god who ruled the old world. He once had the powerful Four Horsemen under his command, and he had the mutant ability to deprive others of their abilities, Hank said solemnly. Then what is his purpose in coming to this world again? I don't know, too much information is missing. Charles thought for a while and made a decision. I have to use the brain expansion machine again. The basement of the teaching building, the brain expansion machine room. Under the watchful eyes of Rui Wen and others behind him, Charles put on the mechanical helmet again, and his telepathy with infinite growth expanded outward. After a while, he found his target, Magneto King Eric. Although he was already familiar with the consciousness of this friend and foe, Charles was still shocked this time. Eric's consciousness aura was more than 3 times stronger than before. Eric, Charles tried to call out with his mind. Charles, in front of a burning stove in a certain house, Eric faced the wall, and he was used to responding with his thoughts to the sudden calls in his brain. Charles, the man called Apocalypse is dangerous. The Eric I know should not be used by people like him who pretend to be gods. Eric, he gave me the power I wanted, enough to overturn the world, and I am no longer the Eric you know. When Eric and Charles were communicating with each other, Shayanki, who was also in the room, looked at Eric with awareness, his eyes flickering with white light. My God, there is such a wonderful ability. Lord Shayanki, what did you see? The Archangel asked. Tianki didn't speak, and the white light in his eyes became stronger and stronger. At the same time, Charles, who was chatting with Eric in the basement, suddenly trembled violently. His eyes flashed with a strange white light, and whispered, "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to connect to your brain. This way, it's much simpler." Apocalypse remotely controls Charles's brain, and his consciousness covers the whole world. He controls the military personnel who hold the key to the nuclear missile in the superpower and sends out a consciousness command. Immediately launch the nuclear missile into the sky. At this moment, all the staff of the New York military base stood up and looked at the control center screen in horror. There was a horrifying feedback message. The United States, Germany, Russia and other places launched nuclear missiles at the same time. Where's the target going? The officer asked dryly. Heaven. Launch all nuclear missiles into the sky. That night, countless people saw that the nuclear missiles, which symbolized death, were all launched into the night sky. There is no need for superpowers to exist. Everything should be reduced to ashes, and then new mutant civilizations will be built on this basis. Apocalypse raised his hands, and the hundreds of thousands of nuclear missiles flying into near space turned their direction slightly, aiming their warheads at the blue Earth below. The moment Shayanki manipulated the nuclear missiles to bomb the Earth, the roof of the house he was in was blasted with a huge hole, and a tall figure fell from the sky into the room, just in front of Shayanki. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 560 Caesar vs. Four Knights. This scene is like falling from the stars. The 3-story villa house was continuously broken down from the roof to the lobby on the first floor. The moment the tall figure landed on the ground, the floor cracked like a spider web, the broken floor tiles were thrown upwards, and the dust was thrown up. The airwaves rushed outward. The clothes of several people in the room were rattled by the airwaves. The 4 knights, including Magneto, squatted down to reduce the pressure of the impact. Their hands were in front of them, and they could hardly open their eyes for a while. What is that? The Archangel spread out his metal wings in shock, and flapped them vigorously. offsetting the falling air waves, and gradually regained visibility in the dust-filled room. Under the hole in the roof, above the pit, stood a blond boy in beach shorts and casual clothes. His eyes were shining like stars, and he stood calmly about 3 meters in front of Shayanki. The other 3 knights only felt familiar, as if they had seen it somewhere before. Only Magneto King Eric shuddered and blurted out, "Caesar, oh, you're here too, Eric?" Caesar greeted Eric casually, then looked at Shayanki in front of him, shrugged and said, "It's a big fish. If you don't take the initiative to come out, I really don't know where to find you." Apocalypse didn't speak. Most of his consciousness is still connected to control Charles' brain, and he wants to manipulate many nuclear missiles to destroy the civilization of the Earth. In this last critical step, he can only issue instructions to the 4 knights. Stop him. As soon as the 4 knights heard the order, their eyes blurred, and Caesar disappeared from the spot. The next moment, he came to Shayanki, and his right fist had already landed on his chest. Superman punches. Tianqi's chest was sunken with fist marks visible to the naked eye, and then with a bang, as if hit by a super shock wave, the whole person was sent flying hard. He smashed through the inner wall of the house on the first floor, without slowing down, and continued to crash into a rockery in the outer yard, and the mountain collapsed, rumbled down. Caesar shook his head and said helplessly, "I've come to you, please treat me like a human being. I'm pretty good when I'm serious, except for Magneto." The other 3 knights were stunned. No mutants could fight back in front of Lord Shayanki. This was the first time they saw Lord Shayanki deflated. Underground, Academy for Gifted Teens, X-Men basement. Charles suddenly broke free from some kind of restraint, took off the mechanical helmet with both hands, gasped heavily, and large drops of sweat covered his pale face. "Charles, are you alright?" Raven stepped forward to hold Charles' shoulder and asked worriedly. Not only her, everyone on the field was terrified just now, not knowing what happened to Charles. Charles was still in shock, clutching his undulating chest. "I wanted to communicate with Eric just now, but I was discovered by Apocalypse. He is too powerful, directly controlled my brain, and made the superpower launch through telepathy. Nuclear missiles, the civilization of the Earth is almost destroyed." The members of the X-Men on the field gasped. Just listening to the narration, their backs felt chills, and only then did they realize that they had walked in front of death once. "What about now?" Raven asked quickly. Charles clenched his fists and said, "It's Caesar." Caesar is on the side of Apocalypse. Seeing Caesar flying out the Apocalypse that he regarded as a god, the eyes of the 3 knights were red, and Storm's furious hair stood on end. White electric current flowed on her body, and the sky followed her furious thunder. "Who do you think you are facing? That is God!" Storm screamed angrily. Her body was suspended in the air, and she pressed her hands towards Caesar. A thunderbolt split the sky in 2 and bombarded Caesar. "I'm sorry, he is a god. I'm super god." "Oh no, super god is right." Caesar raised his eyes coldly, and his blue eyes turned hot and red, and then his eyes turned into physical laser rays, which collided with the thunder that fell from the sky. "Kill him!" The rest of the knights also moved. The Archangel flapped his metal wings, and 3 steel wings flew out like arrows. Spirit Butterfly exerts the power of thought, transforming the virtual into reality, concretizing the power of thought into a weapon and throwing it. Caesar didn't intend to dodge, and let the steel wings and mind power weapons fall on his chest, only to hear a crisp sound of jingling, and the wings and weapons that cut stones like tofu all shattered at this moment. "What?" The Archangel and Lindy were stunned. "Is it still a body of flesh and blood, or a body of steel?" Storm roared, but she couldn't hold on any longer. The summoned thunder and lightning intertwined with the X-laser, and the red and white energies fused and repelled each other. Finally, the strong energy wave exploded and spread outward, and the houses where everyone was in were immediately crushed into dust. Storm, Archangel, and Spirit Butterfly, the 3 knights were stunned by the aftermath and lay on the ground. Only Caesar stood proudly on the spot, and Eric was 10 meters away. He used the magnetic field to protect his body. Just escaped. Caesar, Eric was surrounded by a powerful magnetic field, and gravel and dust were floating in it. He watched Caesar on the field closely, roared, and used the amazing magnetic field after the amplification with all his strength. The ground was constantly trembling, and things with the radius of, meters, houses, foundations, cars, etc., were all suspended upwards, and a strong magnetic field formed a field in midair, and together with the objects, they rumbled down and pressed down on Caesar. Caesar smiled, With his momentum rising steadily, without any other movements, he clenched his right hand with 5 fingers, and struck upwards with concentrated strength. Seriously punch. Boom. It was like the super strong magnetic field of the second A domain. Before it fell, it was blasted by an unparalleled punch. The strength of the fist not only shattered everything above Caesar's head, but even the invisible magnetic field was blasted to pieces. The turbulent airflow turbulently stirred in the air, and even the meter-high dark cloud was completely cleared. The bright and cold moonlight shone down and fell on Eric, who kept his hands raised. Eric raised his head in a daze, looked at Caesar floating a little in the air, and finally knelt down on his knees with a sad smile. I thought I was getting closer, but I couldn't see the teacher's back. Even if he strengthens his strength time and time again, develops his abilities, tries his best to catch up with him, and even sells his soul, thanks to the awakening of Apocalypse, he still cannot shake Caesar even at all. Caesar was right. If Apocalypse can be regarded as a god, then he himself is an existence beyond the gods. It's just a punch from me, won't you fall down so soon? Caesar looked in surprise at the direction where Apocalypse was flying just now. There was no movement there. He let go of his 5 senses, only to realize that Apocalypse had left the 4 nights and left long ago. Where did you go? Caesar frowned slightly. The X-Men basement. Under the vigilant gaze of Charles and his group, the purple portal opened, and Bianchi stepped out of it clutching his wounded chest with fist marks, his eyes locked on Charles, who was sitting in a wheelchair with cold eyes. Chapter 561. Who are you? Ruwen's face was full of vigilance, and she used her body to block Charles behind her. Before Shyanki could speak, the expressions of the others changed drastically, and they shouted, "Shyanki, he is Shyanki!" Aware of the extremely high danger of Apocalypse, Nightcrawler suddenly grabbed Raven's hand, and Azazel put his hand on Charles' shoulder. Both of them wanted to escape here with the most important person on the field. Tianki didn't make any movements, his eyes scanned the crowd, and the eyes were faintly glowing with white light. The next moment, both Nightcrawler and Azazel gave up using their abilities in despair. It was still a beat slower, and the space was imprisoned by Shyanki again. One of his abilities can completely overcome the flow of teleportation. We must protect the safety of the professor. We can only fight him. Knowing that there was no way out, facing the menacing Apocalypse, Logan stretched out his steel claws. Riven picked up the sharp blade from the knee sleeve. Hank transformed into a blue-haired human-shaped beast, and Alex pulled open the chest zipper of the leather jacket. A group of mortals who don't know the so-called Apocalypse shook his head boringly, and with a wave of his left hand, Logan and Riven were sent flying by a mysterious force. With a lift of his left hand, Hank and Alex were thrown high. As the main combat force, the 4 X-Men were nearly spike. Take the professor away. Nightcrawler and Azazel gritted their teeth, and pulled the wheelchair backwards, one left and one right, but they only retreated to the platform where the mechanical helmet rested, and there was no way behind. He's mine now. Tianki opened his left hand indifferently, and Charles, who was sitting in a wheelchair, levitated up and flew towards him quickly. His neck was just caught by 5 fingers in his hands. Charles grasped Shyanki's palm with both hands, and his crippled legs were hanging down. He had no ability to resist the existence of immune mind control. That's it. You are the key to the emergence of thousands of years. If you deprive your mutant ability, I will have the power to defeat that man. Shyanki ignored the other people on the field and took Charles out. A purple portal appeared in front of him, and he stepped directly into it with 1 foot. Professor, Alex groaned after falling heavily to the ground, got up as fast as he could, knelt on the ground, and aimed his open chest at Shyanki's back. Do not, Hank hurriedly called to stop, but it was still a step too late. A burst of red energy burst out from Alex's chest, burning the air, and rushed towards Apocalypse quickly. Apocalypse turned a blind eye to this, and took Charles into the portal. After the portal disappeared, the red energy suddenly fell, blasting through the anti-theft door in the basement of the X-Men, and falling to the place where the energy supply in the basement is stored. Boom. A powerful explosion powerful enough to destroy the entire school building erupted near the basement. Looking at the powerful flames bursting in front of them, the eyes of everyone in the basement showed despair. After a second, the entire school site was flattened by the underground explosion, the flames raged, and thick smoke billowed upwards. On the grass outside the school building, Logan, Alex, Hank, Raven, Nightcrawler, and Azazel looked at each other blankly, not knowing what happened just now. Behind them, an unconvinced voice suddenly came, This time I was faster. I saved 4 people. You only have 2. Yes, yes. You are fast, you are the fastest. Caesar looked at the proud Kuei-an speechlessly, embarrassed to say that he hurried over from 50 kilometers away. Looking at the 2 of them, Logan breathed a sigh of relief. Caesar, Quicksilver, luckily you came in time, in the situation where they were only 1 second away from death just now. If it weren't for Caesar and Kuei-an, I don't know who else could rescue them smoothly. It's not in time, it's still a step too late. Caesar looked at the ruined school, which also had his precious memories. We are useless. Hank's face turned gray. Mr. Caesar. Professor Charles, he was taken away by the apocalypse. I already know. Caesar nodded and comforted. Charles should be fine for the time being. Apocalypse wants to deprive him of his ability. This process requires a certain amount of preparation and time. The question is, where should we go to find Apocalypse? Ruin asked worriedly. Simple. Caesar snapped his fingers and said calmly, I left a special energy mark on the 4 knights, which can be sensed no matter where they are. They will definitely meet with Shanky, and it will be his death. Caesar's words were calm, but with indescribable persuasive force. Everyone on the field, their anxious and irritable hearts have stabilized. Oops, Caesar's face suddenly changed drastically, as if something more serious than the end of the world had happened, which made everyone's hearts rise to their throats again. I'm leaving. Kin is still waiting for me to make dinner. You go ahead, I'm leaving. As soon as Caesar's words fell, a cloud of airwave was left on the spot, rushing towards the night sky like a rocket. After a while, he turned into a shooting star and disappeared into the sky, leaving behind everyone on the grass covered with thick black lines. A crow flew across the sky very appropriately, yelling a few times. Nightcrawler smiled wryly incomprehensibly. So, making dinner is more important than the end of the world, Mr. Caesar, he wouldn't coax the child to sleep, and come out to save the world, right? Hank was also speechless. Very likely. Future Logan rolled his eyes angrily. Isazo spread his hands and said, just get used to it, this is the young master, over the ocean. Caesar crossed the land and sea plates at high speed and returned to the island, but before he landed, he was only within, meters of the island when a mysterious force slightly disrupted his flight. Caesar landed on the beach of the island in doubt, and tried to take a step towards the cabin. The mysterious force continued to wash his body and mind, resisting and repelling his approach. This is the field of thought power. Caesar was really stunned. A field refers to the use of a certain ability to the extreme. For example, Yutong, she has the embryonic form of the spiritual domain, and everything within the scope of the domain cannot escape her cognition and observation. For example, Kuei-an has a field of extreme speed. Within the scope of his field, everything, even time, will become extremely slow. Even Caesar's avatar has a domain, a superhuman domain, which can use its own superhuman power at will. It's like he is carrying a mountain with one hand. Generally speaking, carrying only one end of the mountain will cause the mountain to collapse. But he can distribute his strength to every place under the mountain, and carry the mountain up to the sky without damage. A domain is a supreme state where a certain ability can be exerted to an unlimited limit. But at this moment, on this small island, someone has activated the field of thought power, and all nearby creatures will be destroyed and obliterated. It's Kin. I didn't expect that she would take this step so quickly. Caesar didn't know whether it was joy or sorrow on his face, ignoring the strong repulsion from the field of thought power, and walked step by step towards the cabin that was the core of the field. Chapter 562 Caesar and Kin. The powerful thoughts turned into substantial energy tides, with the cabin as the center, like a sea wolf in a storm, washing away layer by layer, annihilating all creatures within a radius of, meters. The scope of the small island is not very large. The flocks of birds resting in the forest and the shoals of fish swimming by the sea are directly crushed into minced meat by the force of thought, and then turned into nothingness from the minced meat. The ground and beach of the island are close to the sea, so they are dyed a shocking pale blood. Even the air is trembling slightly. Unlike Magneto's object-controlling magnetic field, everything in the field of thought power, from the body to the spirit, will face brutal blows. Caesar turned a blind eye to this, and approached the wooden house firmly step by step. He didn't absorb the chaotic energy escaping in the air, and he didn't use his superhuman ability to fight against this unconscious field of thought force. He just relied on his own powerful superhuman physique to withstand the scouring and baptism of the thought force field. The power of the Superman domain is too powerful. If you use it rashly, I am afraid that Kin will be backlashed by her own thoughts. With Kin's fragile body, she couldn't take any damage at all. Caesar seemed to be pacing, but no one knew that he was moving forward with a pressure far greater than a mountain. The closer to the wooden house, the stronger the repulsion from the minefield. The leaves of the trees next to the cabin are falling, and the wooden body is a little bit dead and weathered. The waves on the beach are against the direction, surging and beating towards the depths of the sea. Kin, Caesar muttered softly, came to the wooden house, and opened the closed wooden door. I saw Kin's small body floating 2.5 meters in the air, her eyes closed tightly, her fair and delicate face was full of pain, her white skirt and long golden hair moved automatically without wind, as if she could fly with wings of phoenix. Caesar opened the wooden door, and the moment he saw the piano, his mental power suddenly increased by more than 10 times, and the wooden house, which was already close to its limit, fell apart little by little into powder. Kin's clothes disappeared with silence, revealing an intact white and tender body, as if carefully carved by God, without any flaws on it. Even though the whole body is naked, it glows with a white shimmer, like a sacred and inviolable white jade artwork. As if sensing that Caesar was watching, she instinctively curled up in the air, with her arms folded over her chest, her knees bent, her long blonde hair falling down from her shoulders to her little feet, and the key parts were faintly visible, making her even more attractive. Caesar was a little dazed for a moment. He has read countless women, but he has never seen such a perfect body as Kin. Soon, under the washing of the astonishing thought power, his clothes, which were not protected by the superhuman domain, began to disintegrate from the outside to the inside. Oops, Caesar smiled wryly, and the clothes on his body disappeared into nothingness, revealing a tall body full of strong muscles and divided according to the golden ratio. Every inch contained indescribable power. If someone takes a picture, it will definitely be able to compare with the world-famous David statue. While all the clothes were disintegrated and annihilated, Caesar moved his body and flew forward to get close to Kin, and gently tapped the center of Kin's eyebrows with his outstretched fingers. A bright light glowed from the fingertips and passed into Kin's brain. It was Caesar's spiritual power. Caesar couldn't use his mind to control objects or creatures like Yutong, Charles, and Kin, but his mental power was stronger than everyone else. Since it is impossible to actively use this power, it is better to simply open the defense mechanism and let Kin's thoughts enter his spiritual world. Doing so is tantamount to suicide for other people. Even Shyanki, who has lived for thousands of years, dare not let others invade his spiritual world. But Caesar dared, only because he is a Superman. There is no existence in this time and space that can kill him, even the mechanism. Here is, the luminous body transformed from Kin's soul came to a boundless place. Below here is the sparkling sea, and above is the starry universe. Kin looked around blankly, not knowing why she appeared here. Shouldn't she be sleeping in a cabin by the sea, waiting for Teacher Kaiser to come back? Then, she heard a voice from far away. Who are you? It is very similar to Teacher Kaiser, but has a very calm and magnetic voice. Although Kin was puzzled, she still replied, I am Kin. Teacher Kaiser said that you can call me Phoenix, Jean. Caesar, I see, the voice carried a meaningful charm, and continued, you are going back soon, go back there, go back to where you should be. Oh, Kin blinked her eyes half understanding, and asked nothingness, what about you, who are you? Me. The voice paused, and said, listen, my name is Kai, the outside world, on the island. Wake up, Jean. Suppressing the sense of resistance surging in his heart, Caesar hugged Kin in his arms and shouted at her. Kin's whole body was shaken, her thoughts faded like a tide, her golden hair stopped flowing, her big eyes slowly opened, and seeing Caesar's face, she asked in a daze, Mr. Caesar, is dinner ready? What dinner? Still thinking about it now, you little greedy cat. Caesar finally let go of his hanging heart, and fell back to the ground holding the piano. Kin looked down and suddenly called out, yep. Why am I not wearing any clothes? Teacher, where are your clothes? It's okay to say. Caesar glared at her. You can't remember what happened just now. Just now. Kin tilted her head, and suddenly said, by the way, I went to a strange place, where someone chatted with me. Caesar asked strangely, what are you talking about? Chatted. Kin was in Caesar's arms, and felt that the two of them were leaning against each other without any barriers. Her white and tender skin quickly turned pink, and her body temperature was also rising. It's very important, but I forgot. Forget it and forget it. Caesar also felt that the atmosphere was a bit wrong. Thinking of the amazing scene just now, He couldn't help taking off on the spot, and fell into the sea with a piano. The icy sea water relaxes the two bodies, one big and one small, and cools down the ambiguous temperature. Mr. Caesar, didn't you go to save the world? Ken asked out of the sea, looking for a topic. You are my world, rubbing Ken's little head. Caesar looked at her and smiled sincerely. Ken, it's great that you are fine. It's good that you're fine, Ken muttered softly, with a pair of small hands on her left chest. Well, her heart had not yet completely calmed down, but a seed planted in the bottom of her heart had quietly sprouted. Caesar sighed worriedly. It's all right now. The house is gone, the clothes are gone, and dinner is not cooked. If the X-Men and others knew that he was worrying about this, he would be speechless and didn't know what to say. Chapter 563 Century Invasion of New York. In the United States, in Boston, which is adjacent to the Atlantic Ocean, in a late-night cafeteria that is open all night. The sky outside was just turning white, and the morning light hadn't even set when two unusual guests came here. The man is young and handsome, and the woman is young and cute. They each wear clothes that seem to have been stolen and don't fit well, but it is difficult to conceal the noble temperament they have inside. Two people, one big and one small, sat on the seats near the corner, ordered a table full of food, and then ate to their heart's content regardless of their image. Watching the blond boy finish his second plate of medium-rare steak calmly, his stomach didn't bulge at all, and his movements didn't seem to stop. The owner of the canteen late at night was secretly speechless. He didn't know where he was, a noble boy who was kicked out of the house. He began to worry about whether the two could afford the meal. Also, that little lolly is too pitiful. Maybe she hasn't eaten for 3 days? If it wasn't for Louie's face, the boss would have stepped forward and asked to pay for the meal in advance. Teacher, the wooden house is gone. What should we do? Ken opened her cute eyes wide, followed suit, picked up a large piece of steak with her little hand, and began to bite hard. It's just that the strength of the little hands is too weak, and the beef is very tough. After eating for a long time, I still haven't torn off a small piece of meat. Ken pouted all of a sudden, and looked at Caesar aggrievedly. I'll do it. Seeing this, Caesar smiled and picked up the Western food knife, but he didn't see any movement. The beef on the piano plate suddenly burst and turned into a dozen pieces of beef the size of candy. Thank you, teacher, Ken smiled brightly, her eyes curled up like crescent moons. Let's eat. Make plans when you are full. If the wooden house is gone, you can build it again. Caesar shrugged indifferently, as if he sensed what the cafeteria owner was thinking. He slightly took out an object from his pocket, flicked his fingers, and the object raised a high parabola, and landed on the boss's head 10 meters away without error. The cafeteria owner was startled, and reached out to take off the object on his head. The object was hard and round, like a large coin, but it shone golden under the light. This is a gold coin? It's such a big one. The cafeteria owner was stunned for a moment. After a closer look, the gold coin still had the pattern of the British national emblem on it, and the code of the old year was absolutely impossible to fake. This is a high-level currency circulated by the upper-class nobles in the past. That's enough for the meal fee plus tip, right? Caesar's plain words came slowly. That's enough, that's enough. The cafeteria owner was overjoyed, and nodded respectfully in response. Ken picked up a small piece of beef with a fork, added sauce, and chewed it slowly in his mouth, as if he suddenly sensed something. The little hand holding the fork suddenly stopped, and his brows frowned slightly uneasily. What's the matter? Caesar saw Ken's strangeness, and couldn't help but look at her in surprise. Wouldn't he activate the domain again? Teacher, Ken closed her eyes, opened them again, and said with concern on her small face, I heard the screams and wailing of many people. Where did you come from? Caesar asked after thinking about it. Ken was silent for a moment. And then with a thought, she pointed her finger in the east direction. Over there, that's the direction of New York. Caesar immediately understood that in his perception, one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse also appeared in New York City. Boss, Caesar called out. My guest, what are your orders? When the boss heard the call, he immediately stepped forward to greet him. His attitude was a 180-degree reversal from before. Can you turn on the TV? Caesar raised his chin, indicating the TV set in the hall of the cafeteria. No problem, I'll drive right away. As if the boss had received an order, he quickly stepped forward and turned on the TV. As the TV screen lit up, it happened to be playing the morning news. Good morning, viewers. This is New York TV, and now there is an urgent news broadcast. Just 10 minutes ago, The central streets of downtown New York were attacked by robots of unknown origin, and many houses, buildings and means of transportation were destroyed. Although there have been no casualties, it has caused serious traffic jams and mass panic. Under the smooth speaking of the hostess, the video on the screen switched to the reporter's camera. In the blurred and bumpy footage, it can be seen that the streets of the prosperous and advanced New York City in the past were extremely chaotic. The streets were full of panicked people, shrouded by thick flames and black smoke. Boom! Something heavy seemed to fall from the sky. After the camera focused, a 2-meter tall robot made of metal could be seen walking out of the black smoke. It didn't chase those people, but lifted a car on the side of the road on the spot, turned it over and threw it 10 meters away. Boom! The car slammed into the phone booth and exploded into a ball of fire, scattering glass shards everywhere. These robots that invaded New York are not only one, but also more of the same shape. They continue to fall down the streets of New York like meteors, and their eyes shoot out scorching laser rays, wreaking havoc on buildings and cars on the road. In just a few minutes or so, central New York City has been reduced to ruins, with flames and thick smoke everywhere, like the thrilling prospect of the end of the world. My God, what monsters are those? The cafeteria owner opened his mouth wide open. A generation of sentinels, Caesar whispered to himself, knowing without thinking, this is the trick of Magneto. The first generation of Sentinel has some amazing attributes, such as supersonic flight, superhuman strength, battle sharing, laser rays and other abilities, but it has not been able to perfectly reproduce the abilities of mutants. The most important thing is that the first generation of Sentinels is made of metal, and they are purely younger brothers in front of Magneto. The real threat is the improved version of the second generation Sentinel, which is no longer made of metal. It can be improved by collecting mutants through repeated engravings. A second generation Sentinel can be said to be a weakened level of Apocalypse. Teacher, do you want to go there? Kin looked at the TV and asked Caesar. Need not, Caesar shook his head. In his opinion, this should be Magneto's personal behavior and has nothing to do with Apocalypse. The Sentinel was created by the superpower government to eliminate mutants, and now being threatened by the Sentinel, it can be regarded as shooting itself in the foot. Present Magneto didn't target ordinary people, only destroying city blocks, which is considered merciful. Just as Caesar thought of this, in the live news footage, the Sentinel who wreaked havoc in New York City, the soles of their feet were like rockets erupting tail flames. They gathered together and flew away in the same direction, leaving a messy ruins. They ran away. Where did they go? Kin tilted her neck in doubt. Where else can I go? That direction is Washington. The corner of Caesar's mouth twitched slightly, just thinking about when Magneto was so principled, but in the next second he took the sentry and ran to Washington, but the White House with the center of government power. Killing the president is addictive, right? Chapter 564 The Battle in Front of the White House. Above the sky. Nearly 20 Sentinels are at an altitude of 3,000 meters, the rising golden sun falls on them, and the outer shell reflects a faint metallic luster like migratory birds migrating. They lined up in a triangular formation and approached the city of Washington at supersonic speed, leaving behind trails of white smoke. Among them, Magneto King Eric was sitting cross-legged on the spacious back of the leading sentry. He wore a special steel helmet made by Apocalypse on his head and a complete combat uniform, with a majestic gray cloak fluttering on his shoulders. Coming, Magneto narrowed his eyes dangerously, looked forward and down, and could see a city sitting on the ground, with countless high-rise buildings rising from the ground like steel mountains, towering up into the clouds. Washington, I'm back again. Magneto showed a slight sneer, and at this moment, a sharp buzzing sound came from his ears. 3 modern Eagle fighter planes were flying towards the Sentinels at high speed. When Magneto looked over, several airborne missiles were all aimed at the Sentinels and fired. I really don't learn my lesson, Magneto whispered to himself, but he didn't see any movement. He just waved his hands lightly towards those missiles. Those airborne missiles immediately stopped their forward trend, turned around in midair, and reversed towards the Eagle. Fighters shoot. The pilots of the Eagle fighter jets did not expect this situation at all. 2 pilots responded in a timely manner, either manipulating the fighter jets to dive down or pull them up, narrowly avoiding the re-entry missiles. The other one was not so lucky. It happened to be pinched by 2 missiles, and it failed to avoid it in time. It crashed and died on the spot. Number 3, the surviving pilots screamed unanimously, and then looked towards the Sentinel group again, but saw Magneto sitting on the Sentinel. The pilot seemed to see the Grim Reaper, His face turned pale in an instant, and immediately reported to the ground command center, "This is the Air Force Falcon, and the, RD has been destroyed by a missile. The wanted criminal Magneto is on one of the Sentinels. Repeat, Magneto is with the Sentinels. I request to retreat to the base. Received, you can withdraw to the base first." Hearing the command issued by the ground command center, the two Eagle fighters immediately turned around and turned back at high altitude without any hesitation. Magneto's ability is magnetic field control. Even if people all over the world know this information, it is still a nightmare to deal with him outside. After all, the weapons and ammunition popularized by modern humans, from guns and bullets to rockets and missiles, are basically made of metal materials, and they are not as easy to use as a small water gun for Magneto. Want to run? Seeing the two Eagle fighters retreating backwards, Magneto smiled coldly. Under the control of his magnetic field, 4 sentries immediately flew out of the team and chased the Eagle fighters at an ever-increasing speed. 10 seconds later, 2 Eagle fighter planes were destroyed by the Sentinels and fell into the field below with billowing black smoke. The Sentinels continued to fly domineeringly, skimming the sky above Washington, and entered the bustling city center under the eyes of countless people who were surprised and uncertain. They were even captured by many cameras and played live on the advertising screen. Magneto commanded the Sentinel team and soon came over the White House. At this time, the White House had already been stationed by military forces. Special forces vehicles were parked in the nearby streets. Fully armed soldiers surrounded the White House. Helicopters patrolled back and forth in the low air. Inside the White House, the current president, as well as a group of generals and counselors, are staying in the closed hall on the 3rd floor. Anxiously, Scientist Trask raised his eyes, and the others followed him. Through the window of the lobby on the 3rd floor, he could see the figure of Magneto floating in the sky and descending from the sky with a team of sentries. "Trask, the robots out there, are you calling them Sentinel machines created to wipe out mutants?" The current president stared at Trask and said in a deep voice, "But now, those sentries are in the hands of mutants, destroying our city, killing our soldiers, and threatening our lives." Trask bowed his head, speechless. "I ask you, can our military handle those sentries?" the current president asked solemnly. According to the nature of sentry combat, to eliminate a sentry, at least 50 armed firepower should be dispatched. And the number of more than a dozen. Trask hesitated to speak, and finally sighed, "With the combat power deployed now, can't fight it." When the people in the conference hall heard this conclusion, their faces turned pale. "So, now, we just stay inside and wait to die?" The current president's face was ashen, his hands clenched into fists. The helicopters that were patrolling at low altitude near the White House moved out of the airspace uncontrollably after Magneto approached, repulsed by the astonishing magnetic field. Coming, the armed soldiers guarding in front of the White House all raised their special firearms in unison, aiming at Magneto, who yearned to fall. "Oh? Non-metallic materials." Magneto looked at the soldiers and the guns in their hands thoughtfully, and suddenly pressed his hands upwards, and the armed soldiers immediately fell down like wheat. Even in the human body, there are traces of metals in it. Unless you replace your bodies with plastic ones. Magneto was expressionless, and his boots fell to the ground. If he was in the past, he would naturally not be able to do this, but under the boost given by the apocalypse, the magnetic field controller can manipulate all the metals in this area at will. This is the magnetic field, which is almost like a god. It's a pity that even this pseudo-invincible superdomain was smashed by Caesar's punch. One punch, just one punch. A gloomy look flashed across Magneto's eyes, and he quickly regained his strength to clean up the military forces deployed outside the White House. Then 20 sentries floated in the low sky at the same time, encircling the White House building. "Aren't you coming out yet?" Seeing that there was no movement in the White House, Magneto shook his head, raised his hands, and with a violent tremor, the entire roof of the White House was lifted by the magnetic field, revealing the inner conference hall on the 3rd floor. "Huh?" Magneto frowned, but the White House was empty, not to mention the president's officials, not even a soldier or security guard. Just now, the magnetic field clearly sensed the existence of someone inside. Magneto turned his head, and in the open space 10 meters behind him, accompanied by a mass of red flames, Logan, Quicksilver, Alex, and Assessor in X-Men combat uniforms walked out of it. "That's it, Eric," a female voice came from the lobby on the 3rd floor of the White House. Magneto turned around again, and sort of an, "Hank," and Nightcrawler in X-Men combat uniforms appearing together with a group of blue flames glowing. The X-Men squad, one behind the other, surrounded Magneto and the Sentinels in turn. Chapter 565 The Four Sides Battlefield. Washington White House. The area occupied by the Sentinels and turned into a battlefield was quiet at this moment, and there were no ordinary human troops coming here. In the future, the X-Men team led by Logan and Magneto, who is in charge of the Sentinels, face each other with solemn faces, and even the air is filled with a strong smell of gunpowder. This scene is just like a few years ago, how Magneto and Professor X treated ordinary human beings and the future of collective mutants. In the end, due to disagreements, they parted ways and went to opposite sides. What Professor X thinks is that mutants don't need to hide their differences anymore, and get along with ordinary people in an open and friendly way. What Magneto wants is to let mutants rule ordinary humans, or to transform this world into a mutant world. The two are like reason and sensibility wrestling with each other, and it is difficult to separate each other. Ruin and the X-Men team took the initiative to break the silence, and said, "Eric, give up. Apocalypse's intention is to destroy civilization and restore order, so everyone must submit to him. That is not what we are looking forward to pursuing. Future, Ruin, are you alright?" Magneto narrowed his eyes and looked at Ruin. Ruin and him looked at each other, and said coldly, "Yes, I'm fine. I'm still alive and well. It's all thanks to you. It's a pity that the bullet didn't end my life." Magneto was silent, did not refute, and only calmly whispered, "I can't help it, it's for the sake of the overall situation." "Oh, take care of the overall situation? That's not what you said when you asked me to go with you before. You said that each of us is an indivisible existence." Ruin sneered again and again, and finally saw his face clearly, and continued to ask, "And your current behavior is just as a thug of the apocalypse, is it also for the future of mutants, Ruin? You will understand my intention later on." Magneto didn't want to quibble and lie. He glanced at the many X-Men members on the field, opened his hands, and whispered inexplicably, "My goal has been achieved. Purpose? What purpose?" The members of the X-Men were stunned when they heard the words. Magneto came to the White House with sentries. Didn't he come for the current president and Congress officials, and the people in the White House just now were teleported to a safe place by them place? If Magneto's purpose isn't the White House, what is? The members of the X-Men suddenly realized that they seemed to be missing something very important. Without giving them a chance to think about it, Magneto waved his hand and issued instructions to the sentry floating in the low sky. The Sentinel's eyes glowed, and he immediately turned into a fighting machine, speeding up and rushing towards the members of the X-Men respectively. Seeing the Sentinels coming this way, the members of the X-Men were startled. They could only put aside their distracting thoughts and go all out to fight the Sentinels specially created to eliminate mutants. A fierce battle kicked off in the White House, the other side, New York, downtown street. After the massive destruction by the Sentinel group just now, the open flames in some places have not been extinguished, and thick smoke curls up into the blue sky. The people in this area have been temporarily evacuated, and the local police have pulled up a cordon outside to prevent pedestrians from entering. At this moment, the earth trembled suddenly and violently, and a throbbing breath came from the uninhabited area. This is how the same thing. Several parked police cars were still honking their horns, and the police officers who were organizing the evacuation were so shaken that they nearly fell to the ground. He barely held on to the street lamps on the street to stand up, raised his head, and looked back at the central area where the crowd had dispersed. The next moment, a look of horror appeared on his face, as if he had seen something incredible. Reflected by the black sunglasses worn by the police officer, a gleaming pyramid can be seen rising from the ground in central New York City. Countless buildings and city streets were all crushed and covered by pyramids until the pyramid's spire soared into the clouds. The 5-star skyscrapers with a height of more than, stories next to it are in front of the mountain-like pyramids, and the height does not reach the waist of the pyramids. It is completely incomparable. Miracle. This is a miracle. Not only the police officers who surrounded the cordon, but also the people of New York nearby who saw this scene, were so frightened that they collapsed to the ground, and then knelt down towards the pyramid in horror. There is a wide and flat ancient altar near the top of the pyramid with a sacred glimmer. At this time, on the altar, Charles was being tied to a stone bed, and a second stone bed was prepared beside it. This was a necessary ritual before Apocalypse deprived others of their ability to mutate. Woo! Charles struggled desperately on the stone bed, his mouth was sealed, and there was a big bald head on his head. The reason was that Shayanki saw that his hair was not pleasing to the eye. In order to successfully complete the decapitation ceremony, his hair was removed in advance. Now it's really over, let's forget about the disabled legs, and even the hair is gone. How will you be a nightclub little prince in the future? Charles' eyes were full of despair. So what if his strength became stronger? It was still not as important as that flowing and handsome hair. Master Apocalypse, on the open space of the altar of the pyramid, 3 knights, Storm, Lingdi, and Archangel, were kneeling on one knee, paying homage to Apocalypse standing in front of them. The Archangel, who is the leader among the knights, reported, according to Magneto's plan, he alone will attract the attention of those mutants. The 3 of us will take this opportunity to meet up and ensure that your ceremony is successfully completed for shelter. Very good. Tianqi nodded lightly. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly raised his eyes and looked out of the pyramid. Not far away, there was a detection helicopter approaching here. They really dare to come here and disturb Lord Shayanki's good business. The Archangel's eyes burst into cold light, and he spread the metal wings on his back, trying to fly towards the helicopter, but was stopped by Storm Girl. Let me come, this is my home field. Storm took a deep breath and raised her hands to the sky. With a flash of lightning in her eyes, the originally cloudless sunny sky was instantly covered by dark clouds. Go! Storm pressed her hands down, the sky thundered, and the thunder and lightning destroyed the helicopter's propeller, causing the helicopter to fall out of control to the ground. And a pilot jumped out of the helicopter cabin in panic. The Archangel snorted softly. You are still too merciful. Even if you destroy the machine and bring people together, it will be over. Storm didn't speak, and continued to use thunderclouds and typhoons to summon violent storms around the pyramid. Thunder and lightning intertwined and fell like a net, forming a natural defense that was difficult for helicopters to break through. Very good. This way, no one can break through to the altar. The Archangel nodded in satisfaction. As soon as he finished speaking, a figure suddenly fell from outside the pyramid, ignoring the forceful breakthrough of the storm and the lightning grid, and lightly landed on the altar where they were. Chapter 566 The Distant Powers. Tread. The shoes landed on the altar hall of the pyramid. Caesar was wearing a cool black and gray windbreaker. The windbreaker reached to the calf, and it was flying backwards due to the high-speed flight. He came here with Zyokin in the arms of a princess, gently put the piano on the ground, and smoothed her messy golden hair. The Archangel felt a burning pain on his face, as if someone had slapped him across the face. After all, he just finished speaking, and no one can break through this natural barrier, but in fact, there are not many people in the world who can ignore the storm and lightning protection, and Caesar is just one of them. At this time the other 2 knights were not in the mood to ridicule the Archangel. Lingdi and Storm were tense physically and mentally like never before. The fearful attitude of a humanoid monster. Only when you have really fought against Caesar, you may know how far you are from the strongest. Caesar ignored the 3 fearful knights, and even ignored Apocalypse. Instead, he looked at Charles, who was bound on the stone bed in front of him, and couldn't help laughing. I said, Charles, why are you getting worse every time? Either the legs are disabled, or the hair has fallen out, and now it has become a sacrifice for the old and immortal. Woo! Charles glared at Caesar angrily. This damned bastard and bad friend. He was in such a miserable situation, and he only picked up his scars to reveal the ridicule, and let people live. At the same time, Charles' chaotic and anxious heart suddenly calmed down completely, and his tense muscles relaxed. Because he knew very well that as long as Caesar came, all problems would no longer be problems. Ask why? Because he is Caesar. Superman Caesar. It's you. Tianqi raised his luminous eyes and stared straight at Caesar. His dark blue face was as calm as before, but his tone changed for the first time. You are the strongest person I have met in this world since I have knowledge. 1. Those mutants who claim to be gods in the old days are not half as good as you. Aren't you also a mutant who pretends to be a god? Caesar looked at Shayanki curiously. Shayanki was unusually tall, wearing an ancient cloak with a hood, and looked like an old Western god stick in the old days. I'm different from them. Different from all ordinary humans, even mutants. I'm the true god of the old world. Tianqi opened his hands, as if he was telling the undoubted facts, and said proudly and calmly, no matter how powerful they are, they will still suffer from birth, old age, sickness and death, and I have lived for nearly 1 year. The body is immortal, and the light of the soul and the light of the stars in the sky competes for glory, has nearly, kinds of mutant abilities involving various boundaries, and is proficient in all knowledge in this world, omnipotent, Omniscient, this is the realm that can only be achieved by gods. After the coercive words of the apocalypse were finished, the three knights including the archangel knelt down on one knee in respect and submission, and the fear that had arisen from Caesar just now was wiped away. If Apocalypse told them to die now, they would kill themselves without hesitation. A very special telepathy, kin beside Caesar suddenly whispered. "What's the matter, Jean?" Caesar asked curiously. "That strange blue-skinned uncle used a special telepathic ability on us." Zyukin grabbed Caesar's clothes tightly with her small hand, shrank behind him in a little fear, pointed at Shyanki and said weakly. Tianqi didn't speak. White light flashed in his eyes. He stared at Qin not knowing what he was thinking. Lingdi shouted, "What are you talking about? How can Mr. Shyanki use telepathy?" Lingdi's ability is a branch of telepathy. If someone uses telepathy on her, there is no reason not to notice it unless that ability is hidden. Even telepathic people can't detect it. Sure enough. You must have used some kind of special psychic ability to make your words contagious, subtly induce the hearts of others, and let the other party recognize you subconsciously. Caesar looked at the silent Apocalypse, as if he had seen through everything, and glanced at the Archangel and others. "It's more like a puppet than a knight, you." The Archangel spread out his steel wings, and was about to make a move, but was quickly stopped by Storm, who reminded, "You can't beat him," causing the Archangel to stop all movements quickly. A complex look appeared in Lindy's eyes, and she didn't ask any more questions. "I don't know this so-called mortal." Tianqi finally spoke and looked at Caesar with a murderous aura surging from his body. "He is really angry. Yet, I'm just a mortal, and I really don't want to be a god. How tiring it is to be a god. I have to drive the Rainbow Bridge all day long, fighting and fighting all over the 9 realms." Caesar seemed to let go of himself, and said words that people on the field could not understand. "Also, you said just now that the strongest person I met was me, right? Unfortunately, among the people I met, there is no one who is more powerful than you. Strong ones probably can't be counted on one hand. More than 5 people are stronger than me. How is this possible?" Tianqi's tone was still Gujing Wubo, but the expression on his face was finally moved. "No." Caesar shrugged and counted with his fingers. "One of them is a mortal, a pure mortal, without any special abilities. If he has money, he is considered an ability. Comparable to the gods. There is a green fat man, although he doesn't like others to call him fat. His name is Bruce, also known as Hulk. Hulk is the second personality hidden in his body. He once pressed a true god to the ground and rubbed it hard. There is an old woman named Gu Yi. By the way, she has a bald head just like the current Charles. She has lived for 500 years without aging or dying. If she is here, she probably has nothing to do with you. There is a man who carries a hammer all day long, Saul. Although he has many human flaws, he is a veritable true god, much better than a godlike stick like you. There is another funny guy, don't mention the name. He has the power of the morning star in his body, and his father is a planet of life." Every time Caesar talked about an old friend, he couldn't hide his excitement and nostalgia, until he touched her hand, and then he concluded unsatisfactorily, "There are many people who are better than you. How is it possible?" "Tony, Bruce, Ancient One, who are these people?" Shyanki cast his eyes on the 3 knights unacceptably, and the 3 knights also looked blank. Apparently they had never heard of the names of these powerful men. "They're not here, they're far away." Caesar sighed with emotion, touched Qin's little head, and said endlessly without surprise, "There is another one. My new apprentice, Qin. She is also better than you." After these words fell, not only Tianqi and the knight were stunned, but even Qin herself was stunned. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelists. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 567 The Power of the Phoenix. Are you kidding me? Tianqi's cold eyes fell on Qin, who was less than 10 years old. Although his face was still rigid and without any emotion, there was already unconcealable anger in his words. Qin was obviously frightened by the apocalypse, and hid behind Caesar in fear, holding the corner of his clothes tightly with her little hands. The 3 knights also shook their heads in disappointment. If Caesar can threaten Lord Shyanki, they can still accept it, but if a lolly like Qin who is not yet fully developed is stronger than Lord Shyanki, then it is really Fangai Tanit. Storm, the most devout of the 3 knights, even shouted at Caesar and asked, "You are blaspheming the gods. I'm not joking. Caesar's tone was as firm as ever. Teacher Caesar, am I really that good? Kin looked at Caesar wonderingly like a Persian kitten, which made Caesar rub his nose in embarrassment, and coughed for less than 3 seconds. Save some face for the teacher, don't doubt yourself. Believe that you can, okay? The well-behaved Kin plucked up her courage, squeezed her pink fist, waved it towards Shayanki, and said viciously on purpose, I am very strong. Tianqi continued to remain silent, his dark blue face looked a little darkened. The 3 knights next to her don't know what to say. No matter how you look at it, Kin is just a little girl who is afraid of strangers. No matter how much she shows her teeth and claws, she still can't change the nature of a child, let alone compare with a god like Lord Shayanki. You don't believe me, do you? Caesar smiled, touched Kin's small head, and suddenly suggested, it's better. I won't make a move later, let Kin be your opponent. If you win, I will leave here directly and let you continue to complete the altar ritual. If you lose, I want you to be my slave for 100 years. As soon as this sentence came out, the altar hall of the pyramid fell silent again. Tianqi's expression changed, his eyes turned slightly, and he didn't know what he was thinking. The 3 knights were in doubt, looking at Shayanki and Kin, not only how to describe this proposal that is infinitely beneficial to their side. Charles, who was bound on the stone bed, whined and struggled constantly, and he was actually regarded as a bet by Caesar, which made him want to yell at Caesar. Kin looked up at Caesar suspiciously, not understanding why the teacher had so much confidence in her. How about it? Shayanki, if you think this proposal is not good for you, you can replace the opponent with me. While Caesar was speaking, he rolled up his sleeves ready to move. Tianqi narrowed his eyes, nodded and said, okay. I agree with this proposal. He didn't have any reason to refuse. After all, he was not absolutely sure of winning against Caesar before he captured Charles' ability, and if the object of the battle is the piano, this is undoubtedly a rewarding question. Kin took the initiative to rub Caesar's hand with her head, and whispered, Mr. Caesar, can I really? Don't worry. Caesar squatted down, put his hands on Kin's shoulders, faced each other, and said in a sincere tone, Kin, you have potential far beyond imagination. Just follow what I taught you on the island. Try to relax as much as possible, and naturally guide out the inner strength. Kin opened her ember-like blue eyes, reflecting Caesar's nearby face, and a touch of pink appeared on her cute face. Teacher, if it's what you said, then I'm willing to try. I don't believe in others, let alone myself, but I believe in you, teacher. If you say I can do it, I will definitely do it. Kin took a deep breath, turned around, left Caesar and walked forward, standing alone against the tall Shayanki about 10 meters away. Of course you can do it, because you are my apprentice. Caesar smiled knowingly, moved a few steps to the side, and stood beside the altar hall with the 3 knights. Do you mind if I stand here? Caesar glanced at the 3 archangels next to him. Welcome. Ling Dian Storm forced a smile. With the violent temper of the archangel who came from the underground death field, if it were someone else, he would have already thrown a few steel wings, but the target was Caesar, who couldn't be beaten, so he could only curl up his steel wings aggrievedly, not daring to touch Caesar. After Caesar and the 3 knights stepped aside, above the pyramid, in the center of the altar hall, only Apocalypse and Kin stood opposite each other. Kin, it's up to you. Caesar stared at Kin's small back on the field, with an inexplicable smile on the corner of his mouth. I'm getting ready. Tianqi gestured to Kin, but Kin ignored him and closed her eyes instead. HMPH, I don't know the so-called mortal. Shayanki raised his left hand. He has the belief of being invincible for thousands of years, and even thought of thousands of ways to kill Kin in his mind, but in order to ensure the smooth victory of this battle, he chose to use his full strength. The lion and the rabbit also need to work hard. Super dynamic vision. A white light appeared in Shayanki's eyes, and in his field of vision, time slowed down as if it had stopped then. Fine steel armor, a set of armor cloaks that can resist missile bombing quickly appeared on him. Air shield, the air around Apocalypse condenses densely, forming a highly contrasting air pressure wall shield, which may be able to resist the frontal impact of an atomic bomb. 10 times the gain. Shayanki's physique is strong and huge, and all physiques are 10 times stronger than the original foundation. Telepathic immunity. Apocalypse's spiritual world has built up numerous barriers. Even if he is as strong as Charles, he cannot be controlled by telepathy. Limited space. Apocalypse restricted the space in the area where he and Kin were located, and mutants could not use all teleportation abilities inside. Body molecular control. Apocalypse turns his body into an ultimate weapon, and can switch his body parts into a weapon form at will to deal with all the battle accidents that will happen next. After simultaneously activating dozens of enhancements and defensive abilities in just half a second, Apocalypse's coercive aura alone is enough to make people breathless. Energy generation. Tianqi raised the palms of both hands, and as the energy floating in the air was absorbed by him, a brilliant golden force condensed and grew stronger in his hands. This blow can easily destroy a skyscraper. Tianqi looked forward, but Qin didn't feel it. Her eyes were still tightly closed, and she was muttering something in her small mouth. Apocalypse, whose hearing has been greatly enhanced, can naturally hear it, and it is impressive. According to the teacher, relax and release the inner. I can. It's over. If you want to blame your teacher for sending you up to die. Tianqi smiled coldly, and blasted the energy brewing in his hands forward, causing the air to burn and explode. Seeing that the piano was about to be covered by powerful energy, it was smashed into nothingness. The next moment Qin suddenly opened his eyes, the soles of his feet lifted off the ground, suspended in the low sky. A mysterious and frightening power awakened from her small body, and that power formed the golden wings of nothingness, which appeared physically on her back like a sacred halo. Like a phoenix. Chapter 568 Conquering the Apocalypse. The storm outside the pyramid is still going on, and it is getting dark and it is about to collapse completely. The thunder and lightning within the cloud dome are intertwined like a net, and purple lightning strikes vertically and horizontally, falling on the city spires and lampposts, which is as spectacular as God's punishment. After being attacked by sentinels, the pyramids, and the current natural disaster, those who are still in New York City are exhausted physically and mentally at this time. A golden light that is as dazzling and warm as the sun shines from the top of the pyramid. Just a faint beam of light at the edges enough to penetrate the dark clouds and darkness that enveloped the city. What? The policeman on duty in the rain looked up in surprise, his eyes illuminated by the golden light constantly overflowing from the pyramid. He is not alone this day. Those who are still in the New York City area can look up and see the light that illuminates the entire city. The top of the pyramid, above the altar. Looking at Qin with a new look, the faces of the three knights were full of horror, but the aftermath of the overflowing power made their eyes full of golden light and dare not look directly, and their bodies were tingling hotly. Qin opened her eyes, and her pupils seemed to be burning with the emotions in her heart. She was like a phoenix that soared above the sky. Qin gently unfolded the golden wings transformed from power behind her, and as the wings trembled slightly, a sharp phoenix-like cry resounded through the sky, and the power far surpassing the explosion of the atomic bomb condensed nearby, tearing everything in front of it. Danger! The three knights who were only on the edge of the battle changed their colors at the same time. The archangel quickly opened his steel wings and protected himself in front of him. The spirit butterfly's thoughts turned into a purple shield to block the front. The three knights who were not targeted by that power were like this, let alone the apocalypse covered by that power. This is impossible. Tianqi opened his eyes wide in disbelief, and blasted out energy with all his hands. In the next moment, the energy beam he blasted was melted and crushed, then the space boundary wall, the air wall, and then the steel armor on his body. Everything in front of Qin's awakened power, they are all as fragile as paper. Idiot, that's the power of the phoenix. If you dodge it, you might have a chance of not dying. When Caesar saw this scene, he knew that the outcome had been decided. The power of the phoenix, but it can even tear apart the universe, carry it head-on, not to mention dozens of mutated abilities. Even if Tianqi was given hundreds of them, he still couldn't resist it head-on. What is the phoenix force? If it is said that the domain is already the upper limit of a certain ability, then the power of the phoenix is above this upper limit. Qin's mind field can be regarded as invincible, not the pseudo-invincibility of Magneto's magnetic field. When the magnetic field is used to the extreme, it can only control most of the matter, but when the mind is used to the extreme, all matter, even the soul and energy must be controlled. Therefore, as the power of the phoenix that transcends the field of thought, it is strong enough to tear the universe apart, not to mention Tianqi, the first mutant who claims to be a god. Tianqi let out a scream of extreme pain. Under the covering blow of the phoenix force, all the defensive capabilities were instantly torn into nothingness, revealing the skinny and withered body inside. Yes, usually wearing armor and a hooded cloak, Tianqi looks tall and extraordinary, majestic like a true god, but in fact it is just an old and short body inside. Even if the body that has been strengthened and increased can be directly hit by the power of the phoenix, Tianqi's body and even his soul will be torn into pieces. I admit defeat. Don't kill me. Under the despair of dying, Xiangqi finally yelled words that he had never said before, but Qin has not yet fully controlled the power of the phoenix, so it doesn't mean that stopping the release will stop it. Under the tearing and devastation of the power of the phoenix, all of Xiangqi's hair was shaved, and his body's surface was bloody, with countless cracks all over his withered body. Just before Xiangqi was annihilated by the power of the phoenix, a figure rushed into the altar area shrouded by the power of the phoenix. He's crazy. The three knights, who defended firmly with their abilities, were all startled. The figure charging forward was obviously Caesar, who was watching from the sidelines together. Caesar quickly rushed into the area of the phoenix force, stretched out his hand to grab Xiangqi's arm, jumped high, and forced Xiangqi to escape by flying into the sky. After half a second, the sound of fengming in the sky fell silent, and the golden light on Qin's wings gradually dimmed until she returned to her original normal appearance, and then she slowly fell back to the ground of the altar. The sky has cleared up, and a ray of warm sun shines on the pyramid. It is finally over. The three knights slumped on the ground exhausted. Even if it was the aftermath of the phoenix force, they still seemed to have walked through the gates of hell. Tread. Caesar fell from the sky. Through the apocalypse he was carrying on the ground with a flick of his hand. Xiangqi's naked body was curled up, and the broken muscles and body surface healed quickly. He changed into a simple set of clothes to cover himself, and looked at Caesar in shock. Why did you save me? Caesar spread his hands and said, you have already surrendered just now. According to the agreed proposal, you are already my slave. It is normal for me to save my slave. Although the body quickly recovered, Tianqi seemed to have been drained of all his strength. He put his hands on the floor, and muttered to himself in a daze, yes. Lost completely. As if thinking of something, Tianqi suddenly raised his head and stared at Caesar with bloodshot eyes. Just under that powerful force that annihilated everything, all his abilities and defenses were vulnerable, and his spirit was almost instantly killed. But the harmless young man in front of him not only resisted with pure flesh, but also had the strength to rescue him from it. I see. Tianqi shook his head thoughtfully, then took a deep breath, and lowered his head little by little towards Caesar. Not only for 100 years, but even for 1,000 years, I am willing to listen to you. Master, it's fine to be my young master, Caesar nodded. Young master, Tianqi responded quickly, and had entered the role of a servant. The other three knights were stunned. The Lord Xiangqi, whom they regarded as a god, really became someone else's slave. So what are they? Qin, it's beautifully done. This practical homework is full marks, and I'll take you to eat delicious food tonight. Caesar walked over cheerfully, picked up the piano with both hands, and kissed her face forcefully. Qin covered her kissed cheek. Her little face suddenly turned red like an apple, and she lowered her head and let out a hum. Practical homework? The three knights looked at each other in blank dismay, and even the corners of Tianqi's mouth twitched. Can these two masters and apprentices take them seriously as opponents? Chapter 569. The End of the Battle. This unilateral crushing and alternative battle not only shattered Xiangqi's void god position, but also allowed him to comprehend an old saying passed down in the great eastern country from his body to his body and mind. There are people outside people, and there are days outside the sky. As if to keep today's lesson firmly in mind, Xiangqi no longer wears steel armor, but maintains a dry and thin old body, only slightly changing a simple cloak outside the body, which looks simple and plain. Like an old servant bowed his head and stood beside Caesar, waiting for his orders and dispatches. Even if believers of Apocalypse walked up to him in the future, they probably wouldn't recognize that the half-stepped old slave in front of him would be the god of the old world who was once so powerful that he almost ruled the earth. After all, at this time, even the three knights almost couldn't recognize Apocalypse. Xiangqi, can you get rid of your pyramid? Caesar held the piano, kicked his toes down the hard floor of the altar hall, and asked Apocalypse beside him. Of course, young master, Tianqi nodded, and pressed his thin hands down. It was a magnificent pyramid the size of a mountain. With a violent tremor, cracks began to bloom from the outside to the inside, and it was about to collapse open. After 3 minutes, it will completely collapse and disappear from the city forever. Xiangqi looked at the pyramid that was beginning to collapse, and there was still a little nostalgia in his eyes. This was the ultimate ladder he used to lead to the throne of God. Then let's prepare to leave. The battle in Washington should be over soon. Caesar hugged the Qin and looked towards the western sky. At this moment, a faint woo-woo sound came to his ears. and he remembered that there was another person in the altar hall. "Charles, I almost forgot about you," Caesar smiled, and walked towards the stone bed with a violin. Charles was powerless to complain about this, and collapsed like a dog on the stone bed that was about to crack. Tianqi kept up with Caesar, but was quickly stopped by Storm, one of the three knights. Lord Tianqi. Xianqi paused, turned around slowly, straightened his body that had been bowing slightly, raised his eyes to look at the three archangels in front of him, and said expressionlessly, "I am no longer Master Xianqi. I am only the son of young Master Caesar now, an old servant. You must remember it in the future, Master Tianqi." "What should we do in the future?" Storm opened her eyes wide. It was Xianqi who changed her life. In her mind, Xianqi will always be a god above him. The Archangel and Spirit Butterfly remained silent. They were both homeless and mutants rejected by ordinary people. "I am no longer Lord Xianqi, and you are no longer knights, so you can go wherever you want, and you can follow whatever you want in the future." Xianqi dropped these words, turned and left, and walked towards the stone bed where Caesar was. Master Apocalypse. Storm's eyes were filled with tears, and she wanted to follow, but she was pulled back by Lingdi. She looked back at Lingdi. Lingdi shook her head at her, signaling not to go any further. He is no longer the Lord Apocalypse we know. His position, wildness, self-esteem, etc., almost everything has been defeated. The Archangel snorted coldly, his steel wings vibrated, and flew towards the sky outside the pyramid, leaving only a group of turbulent hurricanes in place. "Yes. The way forward should be chosen by ourselves. How to go on?" Lingdi held Storm Girl's arm and said with emotion. "Master Apocalypse." Storm stared blankly at Tianqi's back, and listening to Lingdi's words, she suddenly remembered the orphanage she had propped up through theft. Not homeless. After Caesar untied Charles, Charles got up from the stone bed, looked complicatedly at Apocalypse standing on one side, then looked at Caesar and sighed sincerely. "It's really you." His telepathy is also helpless in front of Xianqi, and no one will believe that he can take such a powerful Xianqi as a slave. But this is Superman Caesar. No one knows how strong he is. The miracle is in his hands. It seems to be simple and ordinary. Charles looked around and saw that the three knights had already left. They were the only ones on the shaky and collapsing pyramid. He couldn't help asking, "Where are Hank and Logan?" "At the White House in Washington, fighting with Eric and the sentries he controlled." Now, the battle over there should be almost over. Caesar knew it. Gene had sensed it when he came to New York. When Charles heard this, he hurriedly said, "Then what are you waiting for? Go to Washington immediately." Magneto and the X-Men team, he doesn't want to see anything happen to either side. Apocalypse. Caesar cast a glance at Apocalypse next to him. "Understood, young master." Tianqi immediately raised his left hand and used his own teleportation ability to summon a portal of purple light source on the altar hall of the pyramid. Caesar took the little hand of the kin and stepped in first. Charles followed closely behind, and Apocalypse walked last. Not long after everyone left, this pyramid appeared in the center of New York for less than half an hour. It was like a miracle. Weird potholes. This battle was also called the Battle of the Fallen Gods by later generations. It even became New York City in one fell swoop, a rare tourist destination. Of course, these are things to come. Former Washington White House. Why do you say the old address? Because the former White House site is the center, the area with the radius of, meter seems to have been baptized by war, and it has long been completely changed. Only sporadic white bricks and tiles remain of the iconic White House building. The originally green lawn in the courtyard was now full of potholes. At a glance, the ground was full of Sentinel wreckage, and thick smoke billowed straight into the sky. In the tragic battle situation, when the last generation of Sentinel fell, Wolverine Logan, Transformer Raven, Beast Tank, Pete Quicksilver, Alex, Red Devil Azazel, and Nightcrawler, the 7 wounded and bruised, determined step forward and surround Magneto King Eric, who is standing alone in the ruins and also hangs colorful clothes on his body. The Sentinel Legion is strong, but after all, it is an incomplete generation of Sentinels without the function of learning and evolution. In front of the main members with strong combat capabilities such as Logan, Alex and Kuaiyan from the future, they are still defeated and destroyed one by one. "Eric, it's time to end." Riven picked up a special pistol and pointed it at Magneto. Magneto's helmet was half shattered, clutching his injured left abdomen, looking at the X-Men members around him, and said coldly, "I will decide when it will end, Uncle. There must be a limit to your bravery." Kuaiyan sighed. Because of a guess in his heart, he really didn't want to push Magneto to the end. Boy, what do you know? You all go up together. If you want to win, only one side will completely fall. Magneto stood proudly, raised his hands, and all the metal objects around him floated in ignorance of gravity. The members of the X-Men were tense, and at the next moment when the battle began, "Stop it, just treat it as a face to me," a familiar voice made everyone on the field, including Magneto, stop their movement. Suddenly looking at the source of the sound, a purple portal can be seen just emerging in the area between the two sides. Chapter 570, the end of Stage 1. Inside the purple portal, Caesar walked out holding the piano. His appearance made Magneto's expression fluctuate, and his hands dropped slightly. The X-Men members looked at him in surprise, and blurted out their calls. "Teacher Caesar, young master, Caesar, I've solved it over there, why haven't you finished here?" Caesar glanced at them and said angrily. "Solve? Solve what?" Everyone was stunned when they heard the words. Only Magneto had a dignified face, muttering to himself, "Could it be that?" Before Caesar could respond, another figure stepped out from the purple portal. The members of the X-Men looked subconsciously, and the next second was full of surprises. It was Charles, who was kidnapped by Apocalypse, who walked out. Charles had a bald head, and although his face was extremely pale, he still looked at them energetically. "It's great that you don't have the truth, Charles." Ruan couldn't wait to step forward and hug him. Charles hugged her back and said with a smile, "It's all right, it's all right, it's up to us to ask you that." Professor Hank, who had turned into a beast, smiled bitterly, and the others nodded approvingly. They had been worrying about Charles' safety for the past 2 days, for fear that the Apocalypse would really take away his abilities and life. Mr. Caesar must have rescued Professor Charles, Alex laughed. "You can basically guess this without looking at it. If you can successfully rescue Charles from Apocalypse, Caesar is probably the only one in this world." "Wait. Professor Charles, Mr. Caesar, what about the day's revelation?" Hank asked the question in everyone's mind, which is what Magneto wanted to know, and he stared closely at the purple portal that Caesar and others walked out of. "If I remember correctly, this portal-capable mutant is Apocalypse?" Behind, Caesar pointed to the portal behind him. Everyone thought he was joking, but with one foot stretched out, a thin old servant with simple clothes walked out of the portal. The X-Men members frowned. They couldn't recognize who the old servant was at all. They only felt a familiar feeling on their body. The old servant stopped behind Caesar, waved his hand towards the purple portal, and the portal disappeared from the ground immediately. Magneto King Eric tried to call, "Master Shianki." Tianki raised his eyes slightly, nodded at Magneto, and said in a weak voice, "I am no longer Master Tianki, he is Apocalypse." The members of the X-Men were stunned for a moment, then took a breath, tensed up and entered a state of readiness, and nervously issued a warning to Caesar. "Mr. Caesar, come over here, that person is very dangerous. Apocalypse almost destroyed the world, isn't it dangerous?" It's just that Caesar was unmoved, and Kin beside him also rolled his eyes. Charles patted Ruin on the shoulder to let her relax, and then explained to everyone, "Don't worry. Now Apocalypse has followed Caesar." Apocalypse became Teacher Caesar's subordinate. The X-Men were a little dumbfounded, collectively parched and speechless. This is too exaggerated. They could have expected that Caesar rescued Charles from Apocalypse, but they never thought that he could take Apocalypse back as a subordinate. That is a powerful existence close to God. As expected, you are the strongest. Magneto looked at Caesar surrounded by the crowd and whispered to himself, "Eric. It's all here, do you want to continue?" Charles, together with the X-Men and others, looked at Magneto standing alone. "Why not? I've never fought for the Apocalypse, just for the mutant. Faith in me." Magneto took a deep breath. Even facing the X-Men team, the newly returned Charles, Caesar, Apocalypse and others, he still stubbornly raised his hands and manipulated the surrounding metal objects to float. Even if he is alone against the whole world, his inner belief will not be shaken. Because, he is Magneto. "That's enough, Eric." Charles narrowed his eyes, stared at him and said, I know you very well. You did it on purpose. After you knew about Apocalypse's sacrificial plan, you deliberately caused riots in New York. Let the people in the central city evacuate. They came to Washington again, seemingly attacking the White House, but in fact they just lured Han K-Ruan and the others over. "Why would I do that?" Magneto said blankly. Charles continued, "Because you know the strength of Apocalypse very well. Even if the entire X-Men team went to rescue me, Most of them would never return, so you want to be the villain yourself, so as to delay the progress of the X-Men team. He paused, and said, even if you were alone, you fought for us in secret, stupid. Magneto snorted coldly, released a magnetic field, and the metal objects floating in the surrounding low altitude fell down one after another. Just give Caesar a face, we will have a long life. Magneto turned around and was about to leave. At this moment, military vehicles and armed tanks surrounded the crowd from the road in the outer area. There were also many fighter planes and helicopters in the sky. Look, these are the people you protect. No matter what, even if you save their lives, they still regard you as a different kind. Magneto looked at the approaching army with hatred, and said in a low voice, it's just because your blood is completely different from theirs. After throwing this sentence, Magneto's body levitated up, and flew away at extreme speed. Kuei watched Magneto leave, but in the end he didn't call out father. He looked at the encircling US troops, and at the others, and asked, shall we withdraw too? Charles shook his head and said, if we want to leave, no one can stop us. But as Eric said, we've been running away for long enough, and there's no way we can run away any longer. If they want to fight, then fight. Everyone did not speak, and stood quietly in place to express their attitudes until the army vehicles and tanks stopped at the edge of the battle area. A group of fully armed soldiers got out of the car, hundreds and thousands, holding special firearms, and surrounded them one by one. More than a dozen military helicopters lowered their altitude and stopped 50 meters above the former White House site. Just when everyone thought a battle was inevitable, a bulletproof car suddenly drove into the area from the outside. After the door opened, the president in a suit and uniform got out of the car with a group of representatives and military officers. Put down your weapons. The current president raised his left hand high to let the soldiers disarm, then looked at Caesar and his party, and stepped forward with the congressmen and officers. All, bow. After coming close, the current president shouted, and he, and everyone who followed him, bowed at a standard 90 degrees to the X-Men team. I only offer you my highest respect from a personal standpoint. Chapter 571. There will be a period later. Washington, above the ruins of the former White House. A group of officials and generals with the highest power and military power of the U.S. Empire collectively bowed and saluted Charles and other mutants. This scene not only shocked the armed soldiers watching, but also became an indelible highlight in history. The incumbent president raised his head, with a look of shame on his face, and said in a deep voice, I didn't expect that. One day, the biggest threat will come from the weapons we create, and the ones who save our lives are the mutants who were originally afraid. Trask, the maker of the Sentinel, still kept his bow. The Sentinel he was proud of had become a weapon that threatened the world. Now he was not only rescued by the mutants who hated him, but all the sentries he made were also wiped out by the mutants. He has already. There is no reason to continue Project Sentinel. The current president glanced at him, and continued to say to Caesar and the others, I can't announce the recognition of mutants in my capacity as president. After all, there is still a long way to go before mutants and ordinary people want to achieve true peaceful coexistence. Some way to go, but I am willing to do my best to build a friendly bridge between mutants and ordinary people. He paused, and said seriously, starting today, I will strictly prohibit the development of weapons for mutants, including sentries, and prohibit the army in certain underground places from arresting, maltreating, discriminating, etc., without discrimination. Mutants in society, I think. Trask, you're okay with that? The sitting president asked. No. Trask shook his head, looked up at the X-Men members in front of him, and whispered, I apologize for everything I did before. From now on, the Sentinel project will be terminated indefinitely. The X-Men and others collectively looked at Logan among them. Everyone knew that Logan came with a mission of saving the future world, and he exists in the present time and space just for this moment. Even if you are as determined as Logan, at this moment, your body can't help but tremble slightly, panting out a breath held in your chest, and muttering to yourself, Sentinel, is this doomsday nightmare finally coming to an end? Logan, Caesar walked over and patted him on the shoulder as a sign of comfort. The current president continued, I will hold meetings with congressmen in the future, hoping to formulate relevant laws to protect the rights of mutants, so that they can stand under the same blue sky as ordinary people, and give them the opportunity to display their talents. And the platform. I can't guarantee that everything will be successfully completed, but you have fought for us, and we should fight for you once. This is really good. Hank and the others were moved, unable to hide their excitement. How many mutants are there in the world? Waiting for this day to come you can show your true self upright in the sun, instead of hiding your true face in the dark with a false mask. After the incumbent president finished explaining his wishes, he left with a group of congressmen and generals, and the surrounding soldiers also withdrew one after another, giving them the land of the ruins of the White House temporarily. It's over now, the members of the X-Men breathed a sigh of relief, and one of them, Logan, suddenly fell to the ground, curled up into a ball and twitched continuously, and Hank, Ruin and others were so scared that they quickly helped him up. "Logan, what's the matter with you?" Charles asked nervously, using his mind to calm Logan, whose mind was in a state of confusion. "I'm fine. Little rascal can't hold on any longer, and I've completed my mission. It's time for my consciousness temporarily placed in this body to go back to the future time and space where I was originally." Logan's face was distorted due to the severe pain. He clenched his fists tightly, and the sharp steel claws stretched out involuntarily. He suddenly remembered a very important message, and turned his eyes eagerly to Caesar and Kin next to him, struggling to spit out intermittent words. "Yes, yes, Caesar, remember, be careful." Halfway through the words, Logan seemed to be unable to bear the severe pain in his brain. He closed his eyes and became dizzy, and fell limply into Hank's arms. Reverse. "Careful, piano." Caesar frowned, not knowing what he was thinking, but he didn't let go of Kin's little hand. Kin lowered her eyes, and also didn't know what she was thinking about, but she also held his fingers tightly, not willing to let go. "Logan, he's gone back." Charles sat on the wheelchair made of stones, looked around at the others and said, "We should go back too." "Where are you going?" "Professor, the school has been destroyed." "I accidentally destroyed it," Alex said apologetically. Charles smiled and said, "It's okay, the college is gone, and a new one can be built. As long as you are here, anywhere is home." Professor, Hank, Alex, Nightcrawler and several other young and strong men were so moved that their eyes almost turned red. Ruiwen burst out laughing, and reminded, "Didn't you hear his intentions? Charles is asking us to do coolies, and the labor costs for building the academy have been saved." "Yes. Last time, I built the basement of the teaching building alone." Hank smiled wryly, and glanced at Kuian, Alex and the others. "Fortunately, there are enough people to help this time. Just keep up with my rhythm." Kuian swept away the depression in his heart, and said draggingly, "The members of the X-Men are happy and harmonious, like a big family." Isazuo came to Caesar, looked at the weather behind him, and said hesitantly, "Young master, Caesar smiled and said, "I understand. You can go with them, and you don't have to follow me anymore. You are very suitable as a teacher." "Okay, thank you, young master." Isazuo nodded vigorously, turned around and walked towards the X-Men and others. He found a sense of belonging that he had never had before in the X-Men. In addition, Caesar has Apocalypse by his side, so he, a follower who can only teleport, is no longer needed. "Let's go first." Caesar glanced at Shianki, who nodded and opened the purple portal. At this moment, Kin suddenly took her little hand out of Caesar's hand. "Kin." Caesar looked at Kin in surprise. The little girl who had no initiative in the past was full of determination at this moment. "Mr. Caesar." Kin pointed to the X-Men and others, bit her lips and said, "I want to go with them. They will build a school, and there will be many mutants there in the future." The X-Men and others couldn't help being stunned when they heard the words. They didn't know Kin at all, but they were like Caesar's little followers. No matter how you looked at it, Kin had no reason to choose to go with them. What made her make this difficult choice was, Caesar didn't speak, but took a deep look at Kin, and suddenly pulled her into his arms, touched his little head, and said with a smile, "The wings are hard. You want to fly, right? Then let go and fly. Follow me." Also, it's not good, being homeless all day and all night. Then there will be a period later. "Everyone, let's meet again in the future." After Caesar let go of the piano, he turned decisively and walked towards the purple portal with Yanki. It wasn't until his tall figure disappeared into the portal that tears kept rolling down Kin's small face. "There will be a period later, teacher." Chapter 572. When Kyle comes to Sun Island. Correct, Marvel time and space. A natural office building, in the top floor office. Kyle, who was sitting on the office chair, slowly opened his eyes. The fire in the golden pupils flickered, as if a hot flame was ignited, but it was quickly extinguished and disappeared without a trace. "Boss, how is it?" Yutong pushed the door outside the corridor and entered, holding a cup of steaming coffee in her hand. Her graceful body was wrapped in a suit and skirt, and the catwalks that moved with each style were full of charm. Well, what do you say? Kyle was still frowning and thinking, subconsciously took Yutong into his arms, and while feeling the amazing tenderness of the beauty's body, he lowered his head and took a sip of the coffee she was holding, and the tiredness on his handsome face was relieved a little. Kyle thought about it. The clone Caesar and I are like two mobile phones in a desolate area. Although we can't really connect, the signal between each other still exists vaguely. Just now, I perceived that in his spiritual world, there seems to be the consciousness of a little girl exists, and the other party calls Caesar a teacher, which proves that the current situation of the clones should not be too bad. Yutong smiled, lowered his head and took a sip of coffee, and said softly, "You underestimate your superhuman avatar, don't you? With his strength, it's pretty good that he didn't cause trouble to others, too." Kyle shrugged. Instead of worrying about the avatar, it would be better to stabilize the current world. Since World War I in New York, the current Earth has been completely exposed under the eyes of alien forces. But this is also good. The sense of crisis can whip the progress of others, and make people from S.H.I.E.L.D. Iron Man Tony may have already noticed the calm before the storm, and he doesn't know what new black technology is hiding in Stark Industries during this time. The old comrade in arms, Captain America Steve, ran around with Hawkeye, Black Widow, and Falcon to sweep away the internal disputes and hidden dangers of the Earth. Perhaps they, who have experienced fighting Hydra, know the biggest danger often comes from within. If the inner threat has not been contacted, how can we fight against the alien forces? The last gathering of celestial bodies has only been over for a while, and Thor is probably back from the war zone on the edge of the 9 realms to quell the large-scale wars in other interfaces, and there is no time to ask him to go to the God's domain for a drink recently. Spider-Man Peter has just started high school. Let's let his adolescence be ordinary for a while. After all, there may not be a leisurely and peaceful adolescence in the future. Strange, who was calculated by him, was not kicked out by the Ancient One mage. He saw that he was already learning spells smoothly, and a core powerhouse who would protect the Earth was about to be born. The second generation of Ant-Man Scott also successfully took over the inheritance from the first generation of Ant-Man. Everything is step by step into the original track. Loki, Thanos. Kyle read these two names silently in his heart. The former is okay, but he just got the cosmic Rubik's Cube. It lost its core in the reality gem, so he can only hide behind his back and make fun of it secretly. The most troublesome thing is the latter. The other party sends someone to arrest Lorna, plus both of them are collecting Infinity Stones. Now that this matter has a beginning, it will always enter the White Tropics stage. Boss, when Kyle was in a daze, Yutong called several times in a row, and then he woke up. "I was distracted just now." "Tell me, what's the matter?" "That's right. Just now, Logan sent me a message." Yutong's face became serious. "Logan?" Kyle laughed dumbly. "Didn't he go to Asia for vacation?" Yutong nodded and said, "Yes. But what he sent me was a secret message exclusively for the family." "Oh?" Kyle's eyes showed surprise. "And he used secret messages to prove that Logan's situation is not very good, and someone is monitoring him. On Earth, who is so bold?" "What did he say?" Kyle asked. Yutong gave Kyle a weird look, and said, "He asked you to go to Japan in Asia, boss." "Japan?" Kyle was taken aback. The name of this country was familiar, but he hadn't heard it for a long time. Hearing it at this moment made him faintly smell the blood and smoke from the beginning. Kyle pulled Yutong's black hair to the earlobe, and said, "Speaking of which, Yutong, you were also born there?" "Yes. Without the boss, I would have died long ago." Yutong's tone was emotionless. How could she forget about the things she had done when she was young? But the things back then had been cut off, and she didn't have any hatred or resentment left. Who would hold hatred for the ants who looked down upon them? Since it was called by Logan, Kyle touched his chin and immediately decided, "Then get ready and set off for Japan in Asia." "Okay." Yutong nodded without the slightest hesitation, as long as she was with Kyle, no matter where she went. "Who do you want to bring? Venom, Toxin, or Hellfire?" Yutong tilted her head, put her fingertips under her red lips, and asked innocently and elegantly. "It's not to destroy the country. Why take them there?" Kyle shook his head, looked around, and said in surprise, "Wait, where's Weiss?" "Where did that guy go?" Yutong replied, "I was invited by Jarvis. They are two artificial intelligences, and they don't know what they are studying with Tony. Forget it, just the two of us. Anyway, it's probably nothing serious. By the way, bring the thing." When Kyle said this, he couldn't help but curl his mouth in a wicked way. After an hour, A stealth Eagle fighter plane was driving under the blue sky and above the sea, leaving a straight trail behind its tail. "Boss, Tony is calling." Yutong handed the ringing mobile phone to Kyle, and Kyle took it. Immediately after the phone was connected, Tony's excited voice came out. "Godfather, is the Godfather there? I just finished with Jarvis and Weiss. I got something. Can you come over and take a look now?" "Now? I'm not free right now." Kyle felt the air was a bit stuffy, and pressed down with his hands. Yutong immediately understood, and opened the deck of the rear cabin of the fighter, and the high-altitude airflow outside suddenly rushed in. Yutong's black hair fluttered backwards, and Kyle stood upright on the edge of the rear cabin. The strong wind pressure could not shake his tall body. "Godfather, where have you been?" Hearing the sound of the fighter plane, Tony couldn't help asking curiously. "It's a good day," Kyle said truthfully. "Oh, so it's Reggie." Wait a minute. There was silence on the other end of the phone, and then Tony asked cautiously, "Godfather, are you sure you are going to Japan?" "Yes." "Is there a problem?" Kyle asked calmly. Tony in the New York studio continues to be silent. Question: Of course there are problems, still a big problem. Anyone else can go to that country. He can, Pepper can, even the current president of the United States can, but only the Godfather. It is too exaggerated for the Godfather to go to Japan. I am afraid that elementary school students who have studied history know what this means. "Godfather, why are you going to Rillo?" "I can go for you if there's anything you need." Tony smiled wryly, not knowing what to say anymore. "No, you can do your work first. Yutong and I will go here for a stroll, and we will go back when we find Logan. Besides, it's too late. I'm here now." Kyle held his mobile phone and cast his eyes on the open deck in front of him. Looking down, he could clearly see the large island land in the hinterland of the ocean below. "Hishima, here we come." The wrong name has been corrected. Chapter 573 One Eagle, One Egg. Rimeo, the country of Risen. This is an island country located in the east of Asia, on the brink of the Pacific Ocean. The old Tokyo city was originally the center of economy and power, but because of the nuclear explosion at the end of World War II, not only did Tokyo City suffer heavy casualties, but the radiation was also seriously polluted and destroyed the foundation of the earth, leaving a part of the Kyoto area in a state where no survivors survived deadly. After World War II announced the end of the surrender, the surviving high-level executives of Nissan were forced to relocate the original town in the old Tokyo City area to the direction of Mount Fuji for nearly, kilometers, and built a new one next to the Holy Mountain almost from scratch national capital. This is the new Tokyo City of today. Now, in the blink of an eye, 70 years have passed, and this new Tokyo City has become a world-renowned modern and prosperous city without the smoke of the past. The humanities here are prosperous, the technology is advanced, and the Japanese-style buildings are neatly located in the town, and the cherry blossom trees are in full bloom on the street roads extending in all directions. The gentle breeze blows along the intersection of the street, and the petals of the cherry blossoms are like a dream, falling on the ground like pink snow. Kyle and Yutong walked shoulder to shoulder on the street. Kyle was wearing the same casual t-shirt and jeans. He had a tall and perfect figure and a handsome face like a knife. No matter what clothes he wore, his masculine charm could not be concealed, so many local girls passing by gave him a sneak peek. Yutong no longer wore the suit and skirt uniform at work, but changed into a more casual and loose white skirt. The skirt reached to her fair calf like a lotus root. Yutong, who was wearing a peaked cap, followed her steps forward, her waist-length black hair and the hem of her white skirt fluttering paired with her impeccable beauty. She really looks like an oriental beauty walking out of a classical picture scroll. There is also a slender sword on Yutong's back. There is no scabbard, and the sword body is only slightly wrapped with a white cloth belt, revealing the finely carved handle like a work of art. When Kyle and Yutong walked together, no matter who saw it, they would all marvel at the man is talented and the woman looks good. Because of this, the local passers-by who were interested in the two of them did not strike up a conversation too presumptuously, of course. This is all because the local passers-by do not know the identities of Kyle and Yutong. If they know even a little bit, they will not only lose interest, but also be shocked by unimaginable fright. "The changes here are really big," Kyle said calmly, looking at the modern and beautiful, diverse and orderly city appearance of New Tokyo. After all, 70 years have passed, almost a century. Yutong couldn't help laughing. She only had a little impression of the architectural style of this place. At that time, She still didn't understand anything except the little lolly who followed Kyle to kill. It's been 70 years. That said, it's been a long time. When I close my eyes, I can still vividly remember the events of the war, as if I just experienced it yesterday. Kyle narrowed his eyes, raised his head, looked sideways at Mount Fuji not far away, looming into the clouds, and recalled, at that time. This was just a fringe area of Tokyo City. What was it called? Kangnan District, desolate, rare inhabited. A small town is located here, and there is also a school of swordsmen called God. It's the Shinto no thought school, Yu Tong reminded, boss. This has been recorded in the historical annals of many countries. You, the party and the protagonist, actually forgot. Well, who told you that there were too many genre gyms that were settled at that time? Kyle touched his nose. It's really not his fault, but those gyms that didn't leave a deep impression on him. But this is all a thing of the past, and the human opponents I encountered in the past may have been turned into Lois now. If it goes on like this for another few decades, perhaps in the future, Kyle will not even be able to find an enemy who resents him, and they will completely disappear under the laws of nature. The lifespan of ordinary human beings is still flawed. If you want to conquer the stars and the sea and the universe, evolve towards gods and increase your lifespan is the real way out. Kyle shook his head lightly. Now he has experienced too many things, and he also has the strength and power no less than the Ancient One mage. After seeing through the disputes between the earth and the starry sky, I gradually understood some of the thoughts of Master Ancient One. Regarding whether to check and balance, to intervene, etc., all need to go through rigorous calculations, so as not to accidentally overturn the normal operation of this world. But he is not the Ancient One, and he does not want to be the second Ancient One. He is what he is, as long as he follows his nature and does what he wants to do. Boss. Shall we go to Logan now? Yu Tong asked softly. Kyle thought, don't worry. Now that we're all here, you can take a stroll first and find out the news. I know where you want to go. Yu Tong smiled charmingly, holding Kyle's arm with both hands, and walked towards a conspicuous building. Fuji-style bar. When Yu Tong and Kyle entered here, they really looked like foreign tourists. They ordered a glass of red wine and brandy and sat down in a place like a bar. There are everyone, and information flows every minute from trivial matters of people's livelihood to major national affairs. In particular, Yu Tong's ability is mind-reading. Taking a sip of the red wine gracefully, Yu Tong rested her hand on her tight chin, and after closing her beautiful eyes, her extraordinary thoughts covered the entire bar. Many people were already so drunk that they didn't realize at all that their memories, even the deepest thoughts in their hearts, were clearly visible in front of Yu Tong. In just 3 seconds, Yu Tong's beautiful eyes flickered with silver light, and she let out a surprised "Huh? How is it? Any news about Logan?" Caesar asked curiously. No, Yu Tong shook her head, frowned and said, there's a strange rumor. Tell me the story. In the past few days, many people have spotted an eagle near Mount Fuji. Eagle? What's so strange about this? Eagles are not extinct animals, and it's normal to appear on Mount Fuji. Kyle couldn't help but laugh. When did the Risen Kingdom become so fussy? Yu Tong stared at him and said, but that eagle is not an ordinary eagle. Its body is no less than a small fighter jet, and most importantly, its feathers are blue. Oh, Kyle's pupils shrank slightly. Big Blue Eagle, he suddenly remembered the long past. When the Blue Eagle attracted the pursuing Japanese fighter jets, and resolutely rushed towards the sky in the opposite direction. That was the last time he saw the Blue Eagle. Later, he contacted the master and servant of the Blue Eagle, completely disconnected. It's been 70 years, it can't be it. Kyle picked up the wine glass, raised his head and took a big sip, and said in a low voice, there's more. Yu Tong looked more serious this time, and said, MT. Fuji has experienced frequent aftershocks recently. There's news that the scientific research team has discovered a giant egg suspected to have been born by a dinosaur in the depths of the mountain. PFFT. Kyle almost spit out the wine when he heard that. Dome, shouldn't this be? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 574: The Legendary Man. In the large bar where dynamic electronic music reverberates, young and beautiful men and women dance to the melody in the ballroom. Their bodies become more and more emotional and indulgent under the friction, and passionate sweat is constantly swaying on the colorful floor. In the dark corner of the bar, Kyle picked up the glass, raised his head and took a big sip of the wine, letting the spicy wine stimulate his tongue, but at this moment, his heart was obviously hotter than the music and the wine few. What Yutong found was a blue eagle and a giant egg, which brought back his memories of fighting and killing in this land. Blue Eagle did not return in that battle. It has been 70 years and still has not connected with a delicate connection in his heart. What is the relationship between the Blue Eagle that appeared in Risen and the Blue Eagle that once fought with him on the battlefield? In addition is that giant egg, the strange egg he once buried under the hot spring at the bottom of the mountain, which was extracted systematically? If so, 70 years have passed and it has not yet hatched. This egg is really a pit dug by the card draw system. Kyle was drinking and thinking about it. At this time, the door of the bar. A handsome young man in a suit and leather shoes stepped forward, holding two graceful Japanese beauties in each of his left and right hands, followed by 3 or 4 bodyguards with bare arms and tattooed arms. The manager of the bar is a tough man who was waiting at the door early. When he saw the young man coming in, he greeted him with a warm smile. "Master Sakai, I haven't seen you for a long time. My father is in good health. Stop talking nonsense. Do you have any more beautiful beauties recently?" Sakai didn't even pause for a moment, and continued to walk towards the bar lobby. "Yes, there are, but no matter how good the quality is, it can't compare to the resources around you, Master Banjing." The bar owner is not only not angry, but smiles even brighter. He quickly followed Sakai and gave him a hard look. The spring light on the chest of a beautiful woman. "It's not as boring as that. Why don't you go back?" Sakai glanced coldly at the bar owner. The hotel owner is also a strong man with a height of 1.8 meters, but under the eyes of the gentle young man in front of him, his body was still shaking uncomfortably. He thought for a while, then leaned closer and whispered, "Master Sakai, the girl who came to the store recently is indeed not up to your high taste. It's just that a couple of foreigners just came to the store. The figure is also top-notch. If you want it, I will find a way to get it for you." Speaking of this, the boss's eyes are full of heartache and regret. He originally wanted to taste this, but unfortunately met a dude like Sakai, and after weighing the pros and cons, he had to give up. "Oh? Superb." Sakai walked forward dubiously. As soon as he entered the hall, he didn't need the boss to point out. He saw Kyle and Yutong sitting in the corner of the hall at a glance. Kyle can only see the back, and Yutong can slightly see the profile. But just a side face, just one glance, Sakai's eyes are full of brilliance. He can be counted as having countless girls, but it is the first time for an oriental beauty like Yutong who is amazing, whose appearance and figure can't find the slightest flaw. "See. She's mine now." Sakai clasped the hands of the 2 girls beside him with great pain. But the girls didn't even dare to hum. Yes, the bar owner's words could not hide his regret. "I am afraid that such a top-notch woman can only be met once in a lifetime." And many more. Sakai's originally squinting eyes froze abruptly and strangely when they moved to the sword that Yutong carried with him. "What's wrong?" The bar owner looked at him in surprise. Sakai stared at the sword that Yutong was carrying. The blade was entangled in a cloth belt, but the antique pattern on the handle was clearly visible under the bright lights. "That sword is so familiar. I seem to have seen it somewhere. Yes, now, in my grandfather's library, that sword is." Sakai's face turned extremely pale in an instant. And when he thought of Jian's name, he became familiar with the tall male companion's back next to the top-quality oriental beauty. Knowing that his body began to tremble instinctively, a kind of fear arises spontaneously. This kind of fear seems to come from the deepest part of the genes, instantly defeating all the defenses of the body and mind. "Owner?" The 2 girls struggled to support Sakai, feeling that Sakai's body was as limp as a lump of mud at this moment. "Let's go." Sakai's teeth were chattering, and he choked out this word from between his teeth. "Master Sakai," the bar owner and his bodyguard were both stunned. "I said go. Get out. Get out of here." "Did you hear?" Sakai shouted angrily, but his voice was extremely low, with a hint of bewildered crying. "Yes. Let's go. Let's go." 4 bodyguards rushed to protect Sakai, while the boss and the girl supported him. A group of people approached menacingly, and retreated from the entrance of the bar halfway in a panic. After leaving the bar, a group of people got into the car and drove 10 kilometers away. Sakai's anxiety and fear only eased a little, but his hands and feet were still shaking, until he regained the strength to speak and exercise normally. He grabbed the sleeve of the bar owner with his hands, and roared in a venting manner, "You bastard, are you want to kill me?" I really don't know what happened, Master Sakai." The bar owner was about to cry, and his face was confused the whole time. Sakai's family was black and white, and had a great influence in the whole Risen. Even Emperor Nissen or the Prime Minister, Sakai would dare to go up to his relatives. I don't know how many popular female stars have been ruined by him today. It was the first time for the boss to see Sakai showing such fear, just like seeing a god of death. "That sword is Murasame, Murasame," Sakai yelled frantically. "Is that Murasame?" The bar owner froze for a moment, and then the bodyguards in the same car, as well as the girls, all gasped after him. The driver was so upset that he almost got into an accident. Murasame. Risen's historically famous sword is known as the Demon Sword. Many ancient schools regard it as a sword without a sheath, which is kept and passed down from generation to generation until modern times. At the end of World War II, this famous sword was lost from the Shinto no Mind School. The later owner of this sword was Major General Kyle of the U.S. Emperor. This is modern history known to elementary school students, and it is also a witness to Risen's shame. So, the man at the bar just now, that man is, the bar owner's eyes were full of fear, and he didn't dare to continue talking. Just thinking about it made him suffocate and hard to breathe. That man's name is taboo among taboos in Risen in the records of many history books. The author didn't even dare to record the man's name, and only dared to describe him with pronouns such as Black Devil and Major General of the United States Emperor. If what is the most feared thing for the people of Risen? Before World War II, there were paper figures, ghosts, yakshas, etc. After World War II, only the taboo name remained. The man in the legend almost destroyed their proud and complacent country by himself. Sakai laughed nervously, and whispered to himself in fear, he's back again. Chapter 575. The egg is broken. It took as long as half an hour to digest the news that the man had come to Risen, and the local Sakai group in Risen managed to calm down. "Master Sakai, what are you going to do?" The bar owner swallowed dryly, looking at Sakai, who was much stronger than him in terms of status, connections and financial resources. It is said that the sky is falling, and there is a tall man holding it up. But the arrival of that man was not only as simple as the sky falling, but even the ground would be shattered and collapsed. Risen is about to change completely. What else can be done? Sakai smiled wryly, tightly clenched his right fist with his left hand, and said forcefully, "I'm going home right now. Tell my grandfather and father, not only we can't handle this matter, even my elders have no room to intervene. Keep sending that message up." "I see," the bar owner nodded solemnly. Although he has no contacts, he can still deliver messages to powerful people. Several bodyguards looked at each other with hesitant expressions on their faces, and finally one of them bit the bullet and said, "Master Sakai, we want to ask for leave, just for a day or two." Sakai glanced at the bodyguard coldly, and the bodyguard also bowed his head guiltily. Sakai snorted coldly, "You don't have to think about it, you know, you are asking for leave, you obviously want to book a plane ticket, and seek refuge abroad, right? How dare we?" The bodyguards were silent. HMPH, Sakai didn't speak, not to mention bodyguards, even his first thought just now was to leave Risen to avoid disaster. Yes, to Risen, the existence of that man was far more terrifying than a natural disaster. At least natural disasters can still be overcome through technology and manpower, and that man is still invincible. "You are not allowed to leave. Whoever leaks the news, I will kill him." Sakai calmed down after experiencing fear, and said, "Don't be so anxious, that man's coming to Japan, although it is undoubtedly a catastrophe, but it is also a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I think, in the territory of Risen. From the unarmed children and the elderly to the powerful general and prime minister, they all want to kill that man quickly. That man has suppressed our entire country for 70 years. As long as he exists, you will not be able to avenge your shame and repair the broken and collapsed warrior pillars. In front of the whole world, you will never be able to stand up and hold your head up." What Sakai said moved the bar owner, as well as the bodyguards and girls. "Master Sakai, we're not leaving," the bodyguards said in unison. "Master Sakai, you are enlightened." The bar owner felt ashamed. "Now our country is strong and our technology is advancing by leaps and bounds, which cannot be compared with what it was a century ago. I don't believe it. A country will always be suppressed by that man." After Master Sakai said this, he snapped his fingers and told the driver, "Turn around, let's go back. Go back to the center of Tokyo." Yes, the extended version of the Black Bridge car ignored the traffic rules on the road, turned directly, and returned to the bustling city built on the back of Mount Fuji. Inside the Fuji-style bar. "Boss, someone seems to have seen our identities just now. Do you want me to go out and deal with it?" Yu Tong's slender legs were close together, holding a wine glass, leaning towards Kyle, her sweet lips parted slightly even when talking about killing. She didn't have any emotional fluctuations, and stared at Kyle affectionately with a pair of beautiful dark eyes. "No, it will be a matter of time to be recognized, just do our own thing." Kyle shook his head indifferently, even though he knew it would cause hostility in this land, he still didn't care at all. This is the principle of the strong. Will the falcon soaring in the blue sky care about the hostility of the ant nest on the ground? No way, not to mention the sun hanging high in the sky. "Hey, let's go." Kyle stood up from his seat and walked outside the door of the bar. "Boss, where are we going?" Yu Tong asked from behind. Kyle replied calmly, "Mt. Fuji, Mount Fuji. Rising number 4000 mountain, commonly known locally as the Holy Mountain, is an active volcano with an altitude of, meters. It's not winter yet, but even so, the cherry blossoms at the foot of Mt. Fuji are on the mountainside, and the trees are drastically reduced. The mountaintop area is covered by snow for a long time, and the white ones tower into the clouds. Kyle and Yu Tong are like two tourists, walking in the scenic spot under Mount Fuji. There are many locals who come to watch the cherry blossoms. Seeing them, they just look at them a few times, and don't have much other performance. It's been 70 years since World War II, and not everyone recognizes Kyle after all. Rising's information about Kyle is closed. Photos, videos, and even news reports are prohibited from entering the country, so as not to cause social panic. Some people thought that the village reign on Yu Tong's back was a cause in a chivalrous woman, and the local otaku wanted to take a photo with him, but seeing the majestic Kyle next to him, he gave up this idea and only dared to take a photo from a distance. A photo or two on it. "This place hasn't changed much," Kyle commented, looking at the magnificent mountain in front of him. It would be an exaggeration if the mountain changed. Yu Tong stuck out her pink tongue, and just as she finished speaking, the ground suddenly shook violently, causing the surrounding cherry blossom trees to fall like snow. "This is..." Kyle squinted his eyes and looked somewhere on Mount Fuji, sensing a familiar and powerful aura rushing towards him. Followed by, under the eyes of countless people looking up in horror, Mt. Fuji made a boom, and crimson lava spewed out from the top of the mountain, and along with the thick smoke, it rushed straight into the blue sky. The earthquake followed the precursors, and erupted one after another. The volcano erupted. The earthquake, passengers and pedestrians in the scenic area at the foot of the mountain screamed again and again. They couldn't care about anything, and frantically fled in the direction outside the mountain. Kyle and Yu Tong stood motionless, looked at each other, soared into the sky from the crowd, and flew towards the epicenter of Mount Fuji one after the other. Mount Fuji is usually like a dignified and quiet queen, but now it looks like a wicked woman in a state of rage, erupting hot red molten lava into the sky, and the mountain shakes and continuously throws red-hot rolling stones down. Nothing unusual was seen on the front of Mt. Fuji. Kyle and Yu Tong bypassed a crater and came to the back of the mountain. Just one glance made their eyes shine, and they saw a huge hole on the back of Mount Fuji and on the mountainside, with a length and width of 50 meters. And the hole was hollow and went straight to the inner part of the mountain. This hole is like a monster's hole. Beyond the hole, along the mountain, there are giant footprints, and the footprints are big enough to easily fill a car. These unknown monsters left footprints and extended all the way to the sea until they disappeared at the end of the line of sight. Could it be that some egg hatched? Yu Tong followed Kyle, suspended in the air, muttering to himself. Should be. Kyle's head is a little bit big. What is the thing that hatched from the egg? The landslide was bigger than his cards. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.